This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Activated. Clean web. With Surfshark VPN, you too can prevent others from tracking you online, vaporizing those pesky fellas who seek to do you harm. Surfshark VPN helps to keep your online identity safe by encrypting all information traveling between your device and the internet, potentially saving your personal data from falling into the hands of mega corporations or cyber criminals. Surfing the net looking for hot goss is no easy task. Oftentimes I must trudge through the depths of the internet, crawling through hellfire and depravity to find evidence to build my case, and that's just Twitter. With Surfshark's Clean Web feature, you can block ads, trackers, malware, and phishing attempts. Clean Web makes my experience online much safer and more pleasant, giving me peace of mind that I'm not going to wake up to a YouTube channel being hacked by someone waiting to post a video that you could watch in a single sitting. Ugh. If that doesn't tickle your fancy, then this certainly will. With Surfshark VPN's 3,200 plus servers in 95 countries, you can change how websites view your location, allowing you to virtually appear somewhere else. Whether you're on the go or just seeking a change in content, you can access the Netflix catalogs of foreign countries or even that of your home country whilst you're traveling abroad. When I'm overseas and need a fix of my favourite show, RuPaul's Drag Race UK, I can set my location to England, open BBC iPlayer and watch as if I was at home. Yes, Queen. Surfshark truly does slay. Using code OPINION, you can get 83% off plus 3 extra months completely free. Surfshark also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you aren't risking anything at all by trying it. Just follow the link in the description if you want to find out more. But until then, I think we should get back to the meat of the video. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Right Opinion, the home of a twat with too much free time. And covering drama, isn't it just the most fun pastime to talk about? Well, not always, but as people online have grown more invested in the escapades of creators, coverage is inevitable. At the same time, reporting can take many different forms, and over the years, each audience niche has gradually been filled by their corresponding correspondence. Whether that's to do with breaking the news as it happens with an emphatic tone, or analysing the intricacies of a situation through a more retrospective perspective. What matters to people is that they have a voice relaying to them what's going on in the world, and that voice is at least somewhat reliable. From there, they can construct their own hot takes to share to social media accounts that permeate their relative platforms. A lot of content is typically very organised, with attention to production value and a clear structure, even if it may not be the most highbrow. However, this sort of content, my sort of content even, can also have its disadvantages. It can feel quite distant to some viewers, and if that audience can't connect to a creator, then they may not feel an interest in the topic that they're talking about. Sometimes organisation is unattractive, as much as it pains me to admit. In those cases, viewers may find a solace in a creator with a more casual approach to talking about drama, one that reacts to it in an unedited and unrestrained way, that reflects our innate human reaction to the discovery of revelations about certain shenanigans. And that's the genre where the person at the center of today's video thrived.
a person by the name of CreepShow Art.
If there's anyone who's ever confused at what I did, I will explain it to them. Because if I fuck up and I say something that is shown to be false, I don't want to hide from that. I want to state it outright. And I want you guys to know, because I wouldn't be able to learn otherwise. You can't hold me accountable otherwise.
CreepShow Art, or Shannon, is or was a creator who specialized in this sort of what was described as a one-person podcast. Basically, she'd sit down, she'd have a topic on her mind, she'd pull out the iPad Pro, the pencil and the program, and get to work. Or promote another artist's work, all while speaking her mind on the freshest drama available. Sometimes this would be trending topics, but it could also lean into storytime aspects, where she would talk about her past experiences or even her own participation in ongoing conflicts.
I had people trying to expose me from it. I had people say they were going to extort money from me. I was getting brands who had worked with and been harassed by Lily Jean in my DMs and in my emails, telling me their stories, telling me private shit, telling me things that I shouldn't know, telling me that her mother had harassed them for months, was getting people who had simply talked to her in the DMs. Shit was going off. Shit was going bonkers.
I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone that someone like me didn't really connect with this content, but at the same time, a lot of people did. This idea of a creator just going off with no filters. It provides this impression that she's, quote, real, and that you're hearing how someone genuinely feels rather than a video catered to the viewer's sensibilities. There's also just a lot of appeal to the gossip side of Shannon's videos. Plenty of us have had our run-ins with other creators and have feelings that we will likely never talk about because we consider that sort of thing unprofessional to our brand. However, Shannon seldom showed restraint when telling you the tea about remarks made by other YouTubers or her own unsavory experiences with the worst of what this platform has to offer. It was a much more personal project than the typical drama reporters, and with that came a devoted, albeit opinionated fan base who often had something to say. For many, it was incredibly digestible. It was very easy to put it on the background while you did art, took a shower, or went to sleep. Sometimes you just need a creator where you don't have to care about everything they say, even if they're a bit problematic here and there. Although she launched a channel in 2016, you'd be hard-pressed to find any record of her content before late 2018, when her videos began to garner traction with a wider patronage. As her channel grew, it became apparent that the most successful topics were the ones that typically covered controversial individuals and their antics, ranging from petty art thieves to, well, Onision. Her standing was bolstered by a fairly robust relationship with other creators in the commentary and art community, alongside her seemingly professional conduct towards those around her, which is normally half the job when it comes to personal image. She'd regularly speak about her own story as a person who started their channel when they were homeless and had grafted their way to a position of self-sufficiency. It was a very noble rise to the top, and one that many found inspiring. Nevertheless, when you seemingly present such a personal image of yourself online, there is a trust invested that charges you with the responsibility to at least have some morals that are consistent with the values you expound. When Shannon presented herself, people wanted to believe that they were receiving a person who, whether perfect or not, believed in doing the right thing and valued bringing the subjects of her videos to justice that was proportional to their misdeeds.
Thomas, you are not canceled. Your career isn't over, but you are choosing to act in a way that is morally reprehensible. And unless you acknowledge that this entire thing was a bad move and that you are responsible for this happening, this is going to stick to you. I know you blocked me on Twitter, but I really hope from the bottom of my heart that you do grow from this.
In many ways, she had tied that personal side of her to the philosophy that she advocated for, which made her work online even more sacred to her viewers. That was also entrenched by the slightly slapdash presentation. It wasn't a hard-hitting expose, but it felt like it came from the heart. Shannon was a person who wore that heart on her sleeve, and people felt they could trust her for it. However, throughout the year 2020, a few points of pressure began to be applied, some that she emerged fairly unscathed from, and others that left a bit of a stain, and manifested some skepticism within viewers. However, even with this said, few would have been able to predict the sudden escalation of events in 2021. With a series of very bizarre situations which focused on incognito behavior that seemed to deconstruct everything she stood for, supported by a testimony from a creator that has accumulated over 4 million views. What did this behavior entail exactly? Well, some of you probably already know, some of you are likely in the dark. However, I'm sure you're all equally curious to know exactly where this started and where this ends, if it does. So join me and a couple friends today as we take a journey through this drama in a video that hopefully won't exceed 2 hours, though I make myself no promises. How much of someone can truly be real? How much can be fabricated? And how much can we expect from a creator's persona? Well, let's find out. I think it's difficult when you grow as a creator to maintain everything good about your channel, while evolving other aspects that could require improvement. When your content progresses, you'll inevitably have people who pick up on the changes that it undergoes. A lot of the time it's pretty subjective. Some people may not like a creative decision or new direction, but a lot of people may prefer it, and it comes down to a point of personal taste. In other cases, there may not even be a problem, and people just think that you've changed when in reality you haven't. On the other hand, there may be some valid criticisms, whether they've emerged as a product of your own channel's changes, or they're just continuous flaws that have become more apparent as more people tune in. So let's go to 2020, when Shannon was encountering some pretty impressive growth, covering a variety of unsavory characters who had found themselves embroiled in drama for various reasons. Overall, I think that many people were happy that she was talking about these subjects. However, the focus of uploads had definitely pivoted more towards degeneracy, and that can often alter the perspective of your content when you deal with fresh allegations, especially if you've just covered something extremely serious, or anything to do with Jeffree Star. She did have some problems relating to her own impulsive behavior that seemed to fall short of some people's standards for reliable content.
I am literally sitting here telling you to your face that the man who provided the semen to make one of the most prophetic and profitable liars on YouTube has a LinkedIn page where he says his current job is that he is God. His job is that he's God. He's just God, which is a completely fine and normal thing to put on a resume, on LinkedIn, anywhere.
As I've noticed, CreepShow Art's style was pretty informal, and that style clearly resonated with a lot of viewers. However, the problem with reacting to drama on a cursory basis is that you're working with information as you perceive it, rather than a well-researched, laid-out set of events that you can document with clarity. Some may argue that it's part of the spontaneous charm that sort of content has. But as awareness for your channel rises, idiosyncrasy can only really justify the aspects that one views as subjective. And informational vigor did not always seem to be one of them, especially given how she'd often just parrot information that she had found. For example,
so this video is probably going to be a little bit controversial. I mean, I am talking about something that has yet to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and people are already stating things like, to even question someone about this is in fact ableist. So me making this video is probably going to get me into a little bit of hot water.
In this fabulous deleted video, after reading an obviously very compelling Instagram post, she promotes the rather contentious idea that actress Jameela Jamil has been dishonest about the disabilities she has discussed in her past. What was the evidence for this? Well, supposedly contradictory statements about her health that didn't add up.
From that very weird scenario, she got a load of weird food allergies with that poisoning, and after she healed completely from that, those allergies cleared up. So if you're following her stating here,
I have loads of food allergies. I was born allergic to shellfish and peanuts.
That she's been allergic to peanuts since she was born was her lying. She was just lying right there because she just wanted to lie, I guess. And the truth is actually more convoluted because it involves mercury poisoning, and now she can eat peanuts again. It's a lot to take in, but for me, the main point of this is to note that despite her stating that these claims that she has lied about anything, she's ever said, and her saying that everyone who has ever said something negative about her is some kind of bullshit artist, kind of, sort of, unravels when you realize that, hey, hi, hello, this explanation only works if you also admit to lying in various interviews a consistent amount of time for no clear reason.
I'm going to be clear about this video. It's not necessarily an endorsement of the allegations. In fact, she outwardly states she does not endorse them. However, it conducts some rather poor deductive reasoning that could lead people to a biased conclusion. Lax research on fine details like the one in the clip shown above are what highlights this. The tweet that Jameela is responding to here is not with regards to her specific peanut allergy, which she claims to have possessed at birth. They were in reference to a wide range of food allergies she claimed to have experienced at some point in her life. Therefore, although I could understand some uncertainty, they're not directly contradictory. Even the video that Shannon uses as a reference seems to support Jameela in the fact that she had other post-birth allergies. Peanuts just wasn't one of them. I'm not a big Jameela Jamil fan. I don't think there's anything wrong with clearing up confusion surrounding interviews and inconsistencies. I don't think her response was sublime. But it's hard to really be mad at someone for that sort of response when it was provoked by such a slanted post. I believe she has EDS, a disease that has a lot of complications and one that too many people are accused of falsifying. Suggesting she had Munchausen's is pretty damn distasteful, and to tie that to the EDS like some did was not just attacking her but perpetuating a harmful stereotype. Anyone who finds inconsistencies and immediately rushes to imply that a person is faking it is pushing their luck and assuming too much. And those who propounded this theory were rather quickly forced on the retreats. CreepShow Art included, with the video being promptly unlisted because she can be a little too gung-ho. But a lot of the time, given Shannon's style, it was hard to place blame for any misinformation at her doorstep. Her reaction to evidence was just like anyone else's, even if this means that some of her videos haven't aged that well. Hell, that's a characteristic universal to many creators. However, she had also called out creators for deceiving their audiences, such as Blair White, so it was important that she held herself to the same standard. As the year proceeded, however, the red flags only appeared to increase in number, not just in her research, but in her demeanor.
Now, I want you guys to look at this image. Look at it really hard. Squint your fucking eyes till they bleed looking at this image. And I want you, in your mind brain, to focus on what you think the issue here is. If you stated that you literally cannot tell if this image was made with racist motivations towards Leslie Jones, then you are absolutely right. So the fact that she is drawn in this way and is the only character in this image shown to have fucking lip, it feels purposeful and in a not so great way. It feels like it was done in malice.
First of all, Shannon appeared to be quite flippant. We know she'd occasionally construct her videos off sentiments that may not be substantiated with the proper research you'd expect of a creator, but her attitude seemed to carry much more confidence than the foundations the content was rooted in. Whether it was an artist that drew characters she had deemed racist, even if they'd apologized, or a creator family member's antics.
Jim Bulls over here is a bona fide cult leader. No, I am not saying that to be cute. I'm not saying that to meme or prank you guys. I am literally sitting here telling you to your face that the man who provided the semen to make one of the most prophetic and profitable liars on YouTube has a LinkedIn page where he says his current job is that he is God. His job is that he's God.
In this video, posted in March 2020, she calls the missionary evangelist father of beauty creator Jaclyn Hill a cult leader. Now, I'm not fond of evangelists, and in many ways there is a case that the narratives they do purport could be seen as quite demagogic. However, when we think of cults, we tend to have a very vivid image, and to frame someone as being a cult leader is risky wording.
Also, this man is the man who put his hoo-ha into someone else to make Jaclyn. So I guess we know where she learned how to boldface lie online. So much so that she made an entire brand off it. And like him, they both made brands off this.
Jaclyn herself wasn't very amused by this, especially given how Shannon ties it to Jaclyn, even though she hadn't spoken to him in over a decade. Now the video was removed, and that's fair enough, but given the more genetic connection, what's even the point of making a video dishing dirt on a person's father? What is the point?
I want to make it clear throughout this video that I was not the first one to make things public. I did not make things public, and they did this.
That's a question that some may begin to ask after watching a video on a person by the name of Karuna Satori. Now, Karuna Satori is an ASMR YouTuber and former anti-vaxxer. She engaged in a rather heated exchange with Shannon after she took issue with CreepShow Art's mocking of people who espouse anti-vax narratives.
We are going to be talking about all of the reasons why she thinks I'm scum, a bully, why I should learn where my place is, and how very soon I'm going to lose everything I made on YouTube. Her words. Oh, and also, she apparently thought I was a teenager, despite me constantly bringing up how I'm married and used to be homeless. Classic teen themes.
Now I'm going to come back to this situation in a bit, but all I'll say is that one comment left on a video over the next couple weeks manifested into a 35-minute video documenting the situation and labeling Karuna the anti-vax defender. And although I don't think the points she makes in the video are entirely unfounded, it's once again a question of why it exists. Question that we'll answer very soon. Karuna was certainly oddly outspoken on certain matters that one would deem trivial. She is a dramatic person. However, Shannon is as well, and whereas many YouTubers would probably dodge the bullet and move on with exposing whoever's next on their problematic list, these minor situations seem to end up with a CreepShow Art video. Because she just often couldn't resist, de-escalation was not her forte. I think one of the perks with casual content like Shannon's is that it didn't have to be high-stakes stuff all the time. If I uploaded a video about my latest Twitter spat with some ASMR channel, you'd probably be all quite confused, even if I was right, like I always am, of course. Nonetheless, even if you do make videos about the most trivial matters, you're still expected to operate by a set of tenets that most commentators follow quite closely. However, when content has less consequences, people pay less attention to when you fuck up. So the examples we've listed today didn't really provoke ire from most viewers, and why would they? A few mistakes here and there, it's not a big deal. But if you keep rolling the dice, you're gonna score a 7, and then you'll be in the crowd. There are a lot of minor problems with Shannon's content that when combined amounted to a more significant problem. The fact that she would regularly be quite incendiary in her commentary, the fact that she wasn't always the most scrupulous with her narratives, and the fact that she'd often take it to other social media platforms which rub salt on the wounds of what may be erroneous reporting already. However, these characteristics are not really noticeable on an individual basis. You need a situation that combines all of these traits into one concerning conglomerate. So let's move to May 2020, when a situation appeared to hit a lot closer to Shannon's home.
Days like these, I wake up and I'm excited to spill the tea.
Jake Yonsei is a creator who covers a lot of showbiz-style topics, including RuPaul's Drag Race and the drama that surrounds it. However, in 2020, a movement began known as #CancelJakeYonsei, on the basis that he had repeatedly used his platform to disseminate defamatory content against competitors of the popular TV show in question. It all transpired when one drag queen by the name of the Vixen implied that a product had racist undertones, and Jake posted it onto his Instagram and asked about other people's thoughts. Is this what causes drama now? Okay. Jesus. Anyhow, this provoked the Vixen to go off on Twitter calling for Jake to be reported, subsequently inspiring other people to share their unfavorable experiences with the YouTuber. Another tweet came from a person who claimed he had been extremely Janus-faced towards him when covering a situation. This was quote tweeted by another former contestant, Shea Coulee, who championed the tweet, adding a further "Cancel Jake Yonsei" hashtag onto the original post. This was not the only tweet Shea quote tweeted with this comment, and not the only tweet on this matter. It seems they were just not happy with Jake and his videos. Another contestant, Ariel Versace, also commented on the matter, having a rather heated exchange with a Jake Yonsei fan, asserting that his content is a one-sided breeding ground for mob mentality. A lot of content followed within this movement. Some of it has been lost to time, others not so much. And this deepened the divisions between the two parties and became rather nasty for everyone involved. CreepShow Art, appearing to be a friend of Jake, saw her comrade in a bit of a pickle, and being the good friend that she was, decided to upload a video coming to his aid.
There is one thing that I know about me personally, is that I am a ride or die friend. I am very loyal. I will stick up for my friends through thick and thin, and there is literally nothing you can do or anyone can do to stop me from doing that. I have gotten into actual fistfights with people over my friends. Someone at one point tried to stab me because I was defending a friend, and I just have lived a very long life where the only constant within myself is that if I love you, I will fight for you. And I don't care if the person is famous, I don't care if they have a bigger platform than me, I will fight for you.
How honorable. I think a loyal friend is what we need sometimes, though sometimes being a good friend is acknowledging when they're wrong and not just blindly defending them, though I'm sure Shannon knew that, so she must have had some conviction in her defense of Jake, right? Well, she certainly did.
He also goes out of his way to ask for multiple people's sides of the story. So say there's a situation with two drag queens fighting. He would ask both drag queens their opinion and then put it in a video. Take for example his video about Trinity the Tuck Taylor and James Charles. He reached out to both of them for comment, both of them gave it, and he sat back and said, "What do you guys think about that?" Did he make that situation toxic? No, he simply talked about it.
Now most of the video is her arguing in favor of her embattled buddy, talking about all the times he has supported the drag race community and explaining why the hatred against him was unjustified in convincing enough terms. However, the tone of the video took a turn when the conduct of the queens who had called out Jake were put under the microscope by Shannon. After debunking some rather suspect screenshots, she moves on to the more sensitive subjects.
These messages were sex from when Jake was between the ages of 15 to 17, and these were leaked as part of a paste bin where images of him when he was less than legal and not clothes were leaked as well. Basically, what I am telling you right now is what was posted was revenge porn. His sex, his nudes, revenge porn was posted by and then retweeted by Shea Coulee and Ariel Versace, two people with massive platforms. And these were posted in direct response to them calling out Jake and trying to spread #CancelJakeYonsei.
Now this is a very serious allegation. I understand that people can be petty, but publicizing someone's explicit content from when they're a minor is rather dangerous, and certainly not anything that a public figure like Ariel should be indulging in. And after Shannon's response, many in her YouTube comments pointed out that what they did was not just inappropriate, but borderline criminal, and it was questionable whether they even deserved their platforms if this is how they were going to use them. Shannon also becomes very personal, claiming that the person who had promoted these allegations had attempted to trigger them with self-harm content. This clearly affects Shannon, and she becomes rather emotional as well.
And by the way, just fun fact, the account that is sending out his nudes is the same account that has sent me graphic images of gore and people cutting themselves in order to trigger me to cut myself, because at one point I mentioned that the person doing this is someone online who really enjoys spreading falsehoods about YouTubers and triggering them to do stuff like this, to hurt themselves. And they're spreading this kid's revenge porn. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with you people.
It's a powerful moment moment of one friend sticking up for another, demonstrating how much she truly cares. But did she care enough to get the facts right?
I get if you don't like Jake. I can understand not liking a person. If you think he's too flamboyant, too much, that's fine. You don't jive with his personality and his energy and his videos, and that is okay. You don't like that he reports on stuff that you guys do because you are famous now and you're public entities and people can do that. But what you're not going to do here is lie in order to make him look worse, especially when you have this large platforms.
Podcasts have become notorious for being this source of misinformation, mainly because when you go on a podcast, you don't have a concrete plan or a concrete script backed up with concrete research. A lot of the time, it is just you reacting to the cues that you may be given, and although that obviously has its quirks, I don't think spontaneity can always excuse lazy research. And the truth is that there was still a level of organization to Shannon's content. Just because it felt somewhat impromptu doesn't mean she doesn't go into it with a clear plan of what she's actually talking about. And in addressing the Jake Yonsei situation, she clearly shows an awareness of the points she's making, particularly against the drag queens in promoting, quote, revenge porn. So how in relaying that information did she botch it up so miserably?
You don't think that's triggering? You don't think the act of having your naked body sent to you, that was you when you were a minor, you don't think that would hurt someone? You think that's fine. You think that's funny. They were leaked as revenge porn by someone who was hurting him, and that is sickening that you would do it. It's sick. It is gross. God damn it. And Ariel's a YouTuber. Ariel Versace on YouTube.
This is the quote tweet in question. At this time, the original tweet had been removed. However, its allegations were still accessible, and you were still able to recover the original tweet through inputting the link in archives. Now, I would rather not show the content in question because I don't think it's central to the points that I'll be making. But needless to say, although there are plenty of words I would use to describe it, revenge porn is a bit misleading if you do not have the full context, and saying images is really just false. Especially when you pair this with the idea that the language led some to believe the original tweeter was sexually exploiting Jake for something that they did as a minor. There may have been vulnerable images that were part of a pastebin, but this post was not related to that, and given she reposted the original messages, I assume she saw the tweet in question. Jake's own tweet on the pastebin matter was published before the drama, and it's unclear how related these situations even were. So let's clear this up. The person contending these allegations in the specific comment was using the screenshots as evidence to support their experience that Jake, as a person judging a context and in an elevated position, supposedly took advantage of them during a drag competition that they were competing in. They were both 17 at the time, and the evidence that is shown refers to a sexual conversation that they had. Now, I don't think it was necessary at all to post sex between two underage individuals. In fact, I think it was foolish as all hell. But they were clearly trying to use the evidence to prove that Jake was a bad person and the rest. If a 17-year-old did something terrible to another person, especially another minor, they wouldn't suddenly become a victim because they were a minor. And a traumatized person may be irrational in handling that sort of content. With that said, I think the allegations lack the context that is needed to even begin to assess the situation. The person advocating them is not the original person alleging them. I think the problem with the evidence is that it does not support the idea that he's taking advantage of anyone, just that there was an interaction between the two, which is definitely assuaged by the fact that the two were the same age. There's no other context or evidence, and it's very hard to do anything with the other tweets in the thread as well. I think the drag queens were exceptionally irresponsible to promote the content given their expansive audience. I understand the gay community is a bit catty, but you can't just look at something uncritically because it's about someone you don't like, especially something so strong. That's reprehensible. However, when the crime is misinformation, you should not fight fire with fire.
When in the screenshots I have of it, over 500 people saw it. Over 500 people liked it. And you're not going to clarify that that was fake? And you're not going to spread the sex and nudes of a minor in order to make yourself better. I looked up to you people. How the fuck is this okay?
There was a conflation of what was going on, and although it seems that someone may have leaked nudes, that was not to do with the tweet or the situation in question, and the tweets that the drag queens promoted did not either. And as some people in CreepShow's YouTube comments noted, if they had, this could be seen as disseminating underage nudes, which in many cases is considered illegal.
I don't know what the fuck is wrong with you people.
Additionally, with the context of this account isn't the actual person who's claiming the situation happened to them, this emotional moment in Shannon's video doesn't really feel completely warranted. This Twitter user could be an awful person. That doesn't have a bearing on the verity of allegations if the person is not associated with the allegations otherwise. All they've done is repost it with the attempt to draw publicity to it. These points were made by critics, and once the drag queens mentioned caught wind of it, it all kicked off. Ariel Versace in particular was quite vocal that they had retained a lawyer, promising legal action. This, of course, provoked the nuclear response from Shannon, who basically said, "Bring it on." After all, if showing tweets of a public figure promoting a minor's sex is all she did, then she did nothing wrong at all. The problem is that this just wasn't the case, and the fact that she wasn't prepared to concede on this only heightened the drama. Both parties win the wrong. Let's make no mistake here. Because one of them is a commentator, the attention swung towards her. And it was a real shame in that sense, because you could still call the drag queens out, in my opinion, as public figures. But it had been overshadowed by this other allegation and further drama that, to be honest, was not justified. Many people took Shannon's word as gospel and echoed it over the following weeks, which often caused more harm than good. And instead of working towards any sort of resolution, we were left with this mess of a situation which would have been avoided if someone had merely taken the high road. However, unlike previous situations, this one didn't die. Yes, given that these people can't keep their Twitter fingers still, it proceeded to bounce back and forth on social media, and discussion quickly became this very partisan war of words. It wasn't long until other commentators with a bit more proximity to the situation picked it up, appearing to garner this very gradual ripple effect over the following month as people seemed to observe the problems with CreepShow Art.
Yes, the thread does include screenshots of a private Snapchat conversation. I don't think that was necessary. I don't think that that was necessarily a good thing to include. I don't think it was needed, but there was absolutely no nudes in there. There were none. There was no child porn or revenge porn in that thread that she uses.
A few smaller creators covered the topic, some of which focused on the specific drag queen situation. However, eventually it wasn't long before her videos were viewed through a greater lens, and the incidents earlier on in the year that perhaps were viewed as inconsequential at the time were now seen as part of a bigger picture with regards to her antics. Just over a month after the initial situation, this ultimately culminated in a marginally more popular video from a YouTuber by the name of Toby, a person who I would describe as a rant YouTuber, but also a former viewer and subscriber of Shannon, who hypothesized that she had become more negative in the months preceding, and that this had manifested in the content that she produced.
So with this slightly lengthy video, we'll be looking at the very talented CreepShow Art and dive into why this creator with humble beginnings and a very charitable heart has, of the past 3 months, has turned into somebody who makes a 35-minute video over petty comments, makes false accusations about somebody distributing child pornography, as well as crossing a line and going too far, not knowing when to stop, and reacts before thinking.
This is where the situations of the last few months come to a head. This narrative that her expanding influence had altered her approach to creating content, and that this ultimately escalated in the drag queen shenanigans.
And so now we're brought to this tweet right here, where Lewis goes on to explain the fact that CreepShow has completely and utterly falsely accused two drag queens, two very known celebrity drag queens, of spreading around child pornography falsely. And then Shannon ends up responding, saying, "I literally said they spread sexts that he sent as a minor, because they did." As those tweets are still up, literally fact check me right now.
Is what was posted was revenge porn. His sex, his nudes, revenge porn was posted by and then retweeted by Shea Coulee and Ariel Versace, two people with massive platforms. And these were posted in direct response to them calling out Jake and trying to spread hashtag cancel Jake Yonsei. Shea Coulee and Ariel Versace, two people who are successful in their field and are massively talented, like they're very talented, very gifted performers who have large audience who don't like Jake for whatever reason that they are allowed to not like Jake, decided that they were going to repost to their large audience these images, this revenge porn, to embarrass and hurt this fucking 19-year-old.
However, the video covered a variety of situations, some of which we've already discussed, and others that she felt had struck a bit more of a personal chord, merging them together to outline what many labeled the pattern of behavior. Now, this term is typically used to strike fear into a viewer, but in this case, Shannon just had a few problems that continued to surface in her content. Unless she sorted herself out, these problems weren't going to magically evaporate. Given that Toby could definitely convey a rather irate tone through their content, it allowed them to inject emotionality into situations that perhaps didn't carry the greatest consequence initially, and thus make people take more notice. The video itself was a follow-up to another video where Toby had expressed qualms with Shannon's content, but whereas the previous upload hadn't reached too many people, hundreds of thousands tuned in to see all of CreepShow's blunders under inspection, with many chiming in to say how they felt she had become a more negative force of recent. Now, I don't think that prognosis was completely fair. A lot of commentary creators typically talk about other people, especially those who may have committed misconduct, which often makes the perspective of their videos more negative. However, I think it was the fact that sometimes that negativity didn't seem validated. It was edge without purpose, and if she was going to continue to make the same mistakes, with possibly legal ramifications, then what reason was there for her existence as a creator? Well, let's dive into Toby's video and find out.
Remember that girl who was living out of her car with like little to no resources to make videos? Remember what you did, what you had to do in order to get by with like a $2 pen and a fucking sketchbook from Walmart? I don't know where the hell she went, because all I see now is somebody who does no research.
Are we going to continue to insult them, or are we going to try to educate and make them understand that not vaccinating your kids is wrong? It's a wrong thing to do.
Gets extremely defensive to people who don't agree with her, and makes really petty tweets from a petty situation as her Twitter banner, like a 12-year-old would do.
Toby's now removed video in particular prompted more publicity than previous uploads on the predicament. And when a video like that begins to garner traction, many creators would feel naturally compelled to address it, especially if they have a case to make for themselves, and in this instance, Shannon certainly did. Additionally, as a creator who makes videos on a highly regular basis calling people out, it felt like she couldn't really afford to ignore a video like this. If she's going to make videos on what YouTubers' fathers are doing, then she could at least dedicate a quarter of an hour to a video that isn't the hardest to respond to.
Hey guys, it's Shannon, and today I'm going to be responding to a video that was made about me by the creator named Toby, that's T-O-B-I.
I'll make it clear, Toby's video was not completely accurate in its portrayal of events and how they reflected on Shannon's behaviour. Now I'll go into the particularities of this in a moment, but when someone espouses misinformation themselves and it becomes a dominant narrative in discourse, then it's fairly natural to feel inclined to correct it. At the same time, it's also important that you're not just seen as completely ignoring possible flaws that may be present in your content. So a few days after Toby's video began to hit people's recommended page, Shannon published a 17-minute response to the original post. How would she handle it?
There is a lot of criticism given in this video, and there's a lot of things that I do in fact agree with, as well as a lot of things that I feel like were accidentally misrepresented, and I want to touch on all of it without being defensive or trying to make excuses for anything that I have done or said that isn't productive, because I want to be productive in this video. I want to take accountability where I need to take accountability, and I want to give context where context is needed. So with that being said, let's get into everything.
I mean, tonally, it hits all the right notes. She presents herself as forthright without being overly defensive, and she does take accountability for some of her errors, such as that in the drag queen drama, which, although I wish she hadn't gone out of her way to explain why she was technically still right, is appreciated nonetheless.
I know personally it was not intentional, but that doesn't change anything. The queens shared the sex between Jake and another minor, which is not okay and still qualifies. However, I should have been more careful with my wording and been better about what I had said in that situation. That is completely on me.
However, she makes a decision to stand her ground on a fair few issues, which, although I may disagree with, I can also respect. We all possess different principles for what we believe is the correct approach towards content, and as long as we don't feel that attitude causes excess harm towards others, then there can generally be a degree of mutual understanding. All the same though, when standing up for oneself, it's rather important that you don't mislead your viewers, because it could be seen as you misrepresenting information to make your actions seem more reasonable. These could be on minor details such as that relating to the Jaclyn Hill situation, where she claims that she thought that her coverage was kosher on the basis that other people were reporting on it, and the fact that Jaclyn had spoken about it previously.
The reason I felt comfortable making that video is because both Jaclyn and her father are public figures who work in the public arena. Had Jaclyn's father just been an average guy who keeps a low profile and doesn't have a website dedicated to how he can heal the sick and impoverished, but because both people are in fact public entities who have already been talked about by other YouTubers, I felt comfortable in talking about it. Even Jaclyn herself had previously talked about the trip she would take to South Africa with her family as a part of his job. So for me, personally, I didn't feel like it crossed any lines, and that's why the video is still up today.
I can't speak with absolute conviction to the verity of this claim. However, all records of comments relating back to Jaclyn Hill's father being a cult leader, and most comments about Jaclyn Hill's father at all, stop at around March the 4th, when Shannon released her video. And I struggle to find any other popular videos on the matter. In fact, many of the larger tea channels agree with Jaclyn that the video was in poor taste, as well as feeling this served to distract from the valid criticism the beauty YouTuber was receiving at the time. On top of this, the fact that Jaclyn had mentioned her estranged father is no validation for making an entire video, unless she dedicated enough attention towards him to really justify it. He's not a prominent figure in his child's life or content, as opposed to someone like Greg Paul. Shannon also addresses the comments that she made in the video.
I talked about how he would go to impoverished parts of countries and heal the sick, and I made jokes about how wild it is that he is related to Jacqueline. I made a specific joke saying that this man's sperm was used to make Jacqueline, and that's where she gets her lying from. To me, I thought the joke was fine and an obvious joke because obviously lying is not an inherited trait and it's not transferable through semen. It doesn't go like that. It's just a random joke that I didn't think about because I say things like that all of the time.
And yeah, when you put it like that, it does seem kinda obvious, but it wasn't really just a one-time joke, it was a bit of a recurring theme. And to counter your point, these things aren't that preposterous when you consider the effects of nature and nurture and how someone's family environment may affect them. Anyhow, I have greater gripes elsewhere relating to our old friend Karuna Sartori.
In Satori's video that she made about the situation, she explained how she got very heated and felt a little guilty about getting that far into it, so she ended up doing something very reasonable when you pop off like that and DMing Shannon, giving her a very nice apology. However, no. That wasn't enough. I'm not exactly sure what the hell happened, but Shannon ended up just ignoring the DM altogether and then used it in her video. Now, a lot of people, including me, found this to be so unbelievably petty of Shannon to do, as well as immature and so goddamn childish.
Now, in her video, Toby didn't really portray the incident accurately, in essence stating that after a rather heated exchange, Karuna reached out to Shannon with an apology, which Shannon proceeded to ignore, yet used in her video. Although all of these individual events did occur, they omit information that makes the situation seem more one-sided than it actually was, and Shannon is fast to point this out and defend her video on Karuna as being instigated by the ASMR creator herself, who attacked her endlessly.
About a day or so later, she messaged me saying that she was sorry and I didn't respond because, once again, I didn't know her at that point. She also misrepresented what the situation was about. Instead of saying it was her defending anti-vaxxers, it was her defending something else. I forget what it was, but she didn't say it was anti-vax. Only then, after she said that, and after she misrepresented the situation, did I respond publicly.
In this case, she is completely within her right to correct the falsities contained within Toby's upload. However, she also doesn't have the facts completely straight herself, which is somewhat surprising given it was her own public drama. In fact, there were a few faults with her own recounting. Now, with the majority of the tweets removed, it is somewhat difficult to create a completely perfect timeline, but this is the closest it's going to be. So let's go through these faults.
I did, however, get semi-annoyed when she started talking to the Rewired Soul, aka the man who straight up said I add no value to society, and talked about how terrible I was with him. But I still didn't respond or talk about it because I thought, you know what, it's fine. She doesn't like me. She doesn't need to like me. It's cool.
In her testimony, Shannon implies that Karuna engaged with the Rewired Soul to spite her. She doesn't explicitly say this, but it's the only way that such information would ever be remotely relevant. This is not the case. The Rewired Soul responded to Karuna's tweet about CreepShow Art and they discussed the topic briefly after that. Chris is one of the few people who has not deleted his tweets from around that time, so it's quite easy to follow the interactions, and it's clear that Karuna and Chris have spoken previously and have an established connection. However, there is no record of them speaking after she had apologized.
Because even after she apologized when she said that message, she was still publicly responding to the Rewired Soul, saying the same things and agreeing with him.
Shan states that Karuna had continued to give her grief after she had apologized, essentially saying that her apology didn't mean anything. This is partly true, but also lacking context. Karuna made her initial tweets on February the 19th, in response to Shan's anti-vax video, before sending a message to Shannon. She did not tweet immediately after she sent the apology, and her apology came after her conversation with the Rewired Soul. The next time she mentions Shannon is the 5th and 6th of March, when she expresses her anger at Shannon's Jacqueline video, first in response to Jacqueline, calling her scum, but then responding to Dustin Daly and Ready to Glare as well. Shannon then subtweets Karuna in reference to her reply to Jacqueline, prompting a reply from Karuna, who basically says, "Say it to my face." And CreepShow accordingly does this, and the anti-vax content is brought back up. There was no real contradictory behavior from Karuna. Even if what she said was completely out of order, changing your opinion on someone as new information arises is not conflicting. The lie here that Shannon can't remember is that basically Karuna said that Shannon was insulting someone's looks, when in actuality she was more insulting the anti-vaxxers through their appearance. And obviously you can't draw that from what Karuna says. And once again, I don't think it's too much work to clarify that, but it seems that Shannon had a different route of addressing it in mind. Which brings me to my next point.
I didn't watch her content, it didn't matter to me. When I finally did talk about it, it was after days of Karuna talking about it. And it was after she responded to a subtweet asking me to call her out. I only talked about this after she misrepresented the situation and tried to make it seem like I was bullying just random people, when all I had said was anti-vaxxers look like Karens.
This is the strangest claim she makes in the video. I don't think Karuna responding to a subtweet basically telling her to say it to her face was her encouraging a video. In fact, CreepShow made an entire thread on Karuna in response to that tweet, so she clearly understood what Karuna meant. The video was just a bonus.
Only then, after she said that, and after she misrepresented the situation, did I respond publicly. Only after she had commented on my video, publicly stated I was terrible on multiple platforms, publicly talked to the man who said I was abused and made light of it, privately took back her statements while still talking to that same man publicly about how awful I was, and then went on to publicly talk about me again, this time going so far as to lie about what happened and say that I made fun of someone for something else other than being anti-vax. That was when I responded, because she had already made what was happening public. She had already brought up the apology she made privately. She had already said everything publicly. So I thought me responding was fine.
I'm not particularly fond of what Karuna said, and it shouldn't be hard to see why. I think she did instigate part of this situation. She made it public first, and her framing could definitely be viewed as questionable. But Shannon's framing isn't completely fair either. This wasn't CreepShow Art doing her absolute best to avoid talking about a situation under all circumstances. This was her dunking on someone who was giving her grief. And you know what? She's in her right to do that. But you need to have the facts right, because otherwise it just sounds like you're looking for more justification than you actually have. She'd already won this war on Twitter multiple times. Using narratives surrounding someone like the rewired soul seems cheap and designed to frame it like Karuna was purposely trying to trigger her through abuser narratives. That's not fair on either party. If you're gonna make a video, own it. But in a way, she did, just not the one that we're talking about.
I am not trying to say that Toby is wrong to dislike me or dislike who I have, quote, turned into or grown into. I have changed. I absolutely have changed. And I'm going to continue to change because that's what happens with life.
There's one more narrative that Shannon seeks to address in her upload, and that's one raised by multiple disillusioned audience members, the one that feels she has changed. This narrative was also spawned from Toby's video, which once again focuses a little too much on the personal side, although I do understand what they're trying to say.
When I started YouTube, as you guys all know, I was homeless and I was living out of my car with my husband in Portland, Oregon. During the time I was homeless, I was working between 2 to 3 jobs, depending on what year it was, and I was stressed out of my mind. I started making YouTube videos as a way to unwind and de-stress, and something that I would do kind of as a hobby. I never expected it to become what it is now, and I never expected it to go anywhere.
Shan takes an approach to this point that may surprise some, admitting she has changed, but also saying that this is who she is now and that she wouldn't go back to who she was.
I wanted to say that Toby is not wrong in saying that I have changed, because I have. However, when I started making my videos, I was not happy. I wasn't. There's this idea that when I made my videos beforehand, I was super happy and I was going through all of this and all this stuff. I was not in a good place, physically or mentally. And just because I used to do something that made you guys happy, it wasn't something that fueled me the same way it fueled you. And I hope you guys can understand that. If you like my older videos, thank you. I mean it. Thank you. It means the world to me that the art I made in that time frame means a lot to you, because it means a lot to me. However, I do not want to go back to the person I was when I made those videos, because I was having panic attacks every night in my car, hurting myself, and there is so much more that I can't go back to that person.
She talks about her background, the fact that not so long ago she had very little. She was making videos out of the back of a car, and she has really worked hard to be where she is today. And you know what? I have a lot of respect for that. I'll speak about this more later, but I think anyone who's had YouTube transform their life has a justified connection to their channel which they don't want to yield. I think it's completely valid if a person wants to distance themselves from more personal topics they felt more comfortable speaking about as a smaller creator. Nonetheless, as defined as you can be, you need to be sure what side of yourself you're actually sticking up for.
Again, there's a lot of valid criticism in this video and a lot of things that I'm going to use to move forward. However, I want to make it very clear I am not going to go back to the content I was making beforehand, and I'm absolutely not going to go back to the person I was when I started this channel. I was in an extremely dark place, and even if you liked me better when I was going through that and making content surrounding that, that is something I simply cannot do, if only for my own mental health and my own needs.
I don't think Toby or others were asking Shannon to return to her homeless style. Although I think some would have liked to have seen that more personal side of her again, they were also concerned that she'd become too cynical and too harsh in her presentation of people's actions, that she was more preoccupied with having a video out on a daily basis than the due diligence that such content required, and that she spent far too much time in the Twitter mindset of constantly engaging in pointless views. That's not a side of yourself that you want to retain if you care about improving yourself as a person, and there was just an indication that maybe Shannon hadn't expelled that slightly less well-rounded aspect of her. I have a fair few issues with Shannon's video, mainly because it is such a level-headed response that makes a fair few concessions, and therefore it makes it difficult to explain her subsequent misrepresentations. Nothing is grossly distorted, but they're all noticeable once you're familiar with the actual version of events. The strange thing is that I think if she had told the truth, it still wouldn't have been a big deal. At the end of the day, Karuna in particular made some extremely strongly worded comments towards her, and although I personally wouldn't make a response video to it, given the style of the CreepShow Art channel, I don't think a response is unreasonable. However, once again, her habit of slightly bending the facts seems somewhat second nature, and given the fact that her response video was in a way like any other CreepShow Art video, you could see that there were still parts of her that hadn't changed, and those with the critical eye picked it up. There was one moderately well-received 10-minute video that observed some issues with Shannon's response, but because the truth was still not particularly damning and Shannon had apologized on the points that related to her greatest shortcomings, most were inclined to accept the apology and move on. After all, there were greater enemies out there to fight, though I'm not sure everyone agreed.
CreepShow Art is her channel. The video is called H3H3 is faking drama with Trisha Paytas for views, and it's gross.
Right now, it ain't fake.
Trust me, I wish it was fake. Yeah, I wish it was fake. But you know what this shit I'm dealing with is like, fuck you. I wish this shit was fake.
A month later, CreepShow had her channel temporarily demonetized shortly after H3's response to an older video where she had claimed Ethan and Ela were faking drama for views. At first, some thought this was related to Ethan and Ela's video, though Ariel Versace chose to tweet at Shannon, claiming responsibility for the outcome. Fortunately, in this case, H3 stated that they spoke to YouTube and managed to reverse this decision, likely in an attempt to distance themselves from any idea that they would want to have a channel critical of them demonetized. But it showed that some people were just not over it. And should they be? Versace's comments completed this saga of drama, and although Shannon's video on the #CancelJakeBeyonce matter had been unlisted for nearly a month at this point, showing that she wanted to move on from it and making me ask whether this was really Versace's doing, there was still a brooding sentiment that all was not over. Shannon's video, although being a defense of her character, which I can respect, never contained the pledge to change. Sure, she apologized for her errors, but defended what many believed yielded those exact errors. And so although it was fair to give her a second chance, it constantly felt like she was walking a tightrope that threatened to plunge her back into the abyss of conflict, with possibly worse consequences. The strange detail is that she seemed to be aware of that, and if she is conscious of that side of her, how much of that can be chalked up to impulsivity? Some believe that she was simply too blasé and dismissive of the actual consequences her words pertained. Others believe she was far too emotionally invested in the topics to think clearly. Neither of these seem particularly consistent with each other. In fact, they seem kind of contradictory. Yet they both rear their head in Shannon's video. What we know is that she wasn't going back. So, what does going forward mean? As 2020 proceeded, CreepShow went in and out of the motions of uploads and occasional arguments with any old creator who was willing to trade words with our title character. However, as the year drew to a close and Christmas seemed to approach, Shannon had some tidings to share, though I won't be the one to share them today. Yes, ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between, today I've brought a friend to help me shed light on a situation that seemed murkier than any other. So to talk about the Hopeless Peaches drama, I present my small channel drama correspondent, SisterZio, to talk about these charades. Take it away, girl.
The right opinion. The pineapple pizza hater he is wants me to talk about a little incident with you lucky group of people. Let me just look through my files here. Hopeless Peaches and CreepShow Art. For those of you who do not know, Hopeless Peaches is a content creator within the art commentary community. I know, another subgenre of commentators crawling around like the rats they are. At least this time, they can draw. And I'm pretty sure all of you know who CreepShow is by now. I personally like to call her the Nicocado Avocado of the art community. The only difference between the two is that he is playing a character, she is not. However, before we get into the real juicy parts of all of this, I need to briefly supply a bit more context. A lot of you know already about Toby from TRO. However, after her CreepShow Art video, she had started to obtain more eyes towards her. For better or for worse, this had led to more people digging into Toby's character and starting to find issues with her attitude and opinions towards other drama channels making videos on creators she seemingly supported.
I'm sick and tired of commentary channels and drama channels that severely hyper-criticize and pick apart every single little thing that somebody does online, even though they know themselves as fucking creators that there is shit that goes on behind Close fucking doors!
You're screaming about drama channels being hypocritical, which is a drastic overgeneralization. Most drama channels literally report what's going on in the internet world or what's happening with the public figure. What about those channels is so hypercritical? Of course they aren't aware of what happens behind closed doors. I completely agree. But who is to say that what's happening behind closed doors isn't problematic?
A lot of other people had also called her out for numerous amount of hypocrisies. This later turned into its own massive drama containing multiple people either defending Toby or going against her. There was a lot of more nuance in the situation despite that, where Omnia, one of Toby's detractors, had even leaked a personal story of Toby's by mistake when attempting to show DMs between Toby and themselves. Hopeless Peaches had actually taken notice of this and left a few comments disavowing these actions. This, however, led to YouTube commentator PrisonMate Luke to make a video explaining his frustrations with the fact that the community is still talking about Toby. He had criticized Peaches in the end for having public tangents within the situation, then leaving comments where she claimed to not want to be associated with the drama and wanted no part in it whatsoever.
And another person who commented was Hopeless Peaches, who also decided to put herself into the drama despite constantly saying how she doesn't want to be in it, and would just never leave it alone. And when people like Thummin called her out for her terrible and biased behavior, she made a community post about how she wasn't friends with Toby, which I didn't actually know she wasn't friends with Toby, because she did everything in her power to defend her.
However, this was then later followed up by Luke with claims that Peaches was suicide baiting, as Peaches had left a few vague tweets alluding to her having suicidal thoughts.
Well, you say how you're going to be taking a break from the drama and comments and all that, which is fine. If you need a break, you need one. I'm not saying you don't have mental health problems, but you would constantly come back to post more things and beg for sympathy. And when you were getting genuine criticism for all the garbage you've done, you decided to suicide bait your audience.
Now I want to make something clear here. Luke is an idiot in more ways than one, and I would apologize if I'm being too harsh, but if you have the balls to claim someone is faking suicide for attention in front of a large audience, especially without taking into consideration the repercussions that could follow, you lose all sympathy from me. When it comes to situations like these, it's better to give people the benefit of the doubt and back down for a little and wait things out. Unless you're like Luke, who likes to sniff and eat glue, doubling down on these things is never a good option. Also, Luke, the term you used wasn't even the correct one. Suicide baiter is a term that's meant for those who bait people into suicide. A month later, after the release of this video, Miss Shannon had decided to put out a tweet of her own, accusing someone of spreading lies about them, saying that Shannon was a psychotic person. Oh no, how terrible. This is what I call foreshadowing, by the way. Our best friend Luke had picked up on this, rubbed his hairy, disease-filled rat hands together and rushed over the CreepShow's DMs, and behold, it turns out Shannon's tweet was about Peaches all along. Shocking. Luke decided to take this time to turn this into a video. Now before we get into this fantastic video of Luke's, I want to play a fun game. Do you think that Luke A treated these as allegations and rumors, or B, took everything that Shannon said at face value because he's a dirty rat who does no research before clicking upload? It's clearly B. I mean, he doesn't even make it hard. When he opens up about Shannon's rumors, he straight up says,
"Now before Peaches or anyone else says that I'm faking these or something else stupid, I got these from the lady herself, CreepShow. So don't try and say these are fake."
Oh wow, man. Who wouldn't trust Shannon? She's such an angel who should always be taken at face value, right? Not to mention that I personally think a lot of the things that were said were petty to say the least. I mean, one of the issues Shannon had was that after her Jaclyn Hill video, a video that was seen as notoriously bad by the community, Peaches had decided to soft block her on Twitter.
And when Peaches got mad at CreepShow for her Jaclyn Hill video, instead of being a friend and not letting it ruin her friendship with her, she soft blocked CreepShow and started vaguely tweeting about her out of spite.
Oh no, a person doesn't like you anymore. I get that she was seen as a friend, but the fact that you left that in there just for the sake to make everything seem so much larger than it was is pretty pathetic. Now I will say, there were other portions that were important, like her claims of Peaches going around and spreading lies about her.
And not only that, Peaches decided to ruin CreepShow's reputation in the art community, telling people that CreepShow had yelled at her and was just losing it at her, poisoning CreepShow's reputation while she was still just a small channel. She was below 100,000 subscribers when this happened. And the crazy part is that while this was all going on, CreepShow was in the dark and thought everything was okay between her and Peaches.
I can see why someone would be upset with that. And if that were true, I'd agree that would probably be an important thing to address. Though later down the line, you'll see that wasn't also black and white. After Luke uploaded the video, two notable people had decided to leave a comment, one being Shannon, thanking Luke for making the video, and the other a YouTuber known as Camilla Cuevas, a content creator in the animation and Undertale community who had claimed Peaches had as well spread lies about her. Camilla had also claimed that Peaches bullied her to the point of needing to go to the hospital. Now there were also a bunch of different people who later came forward about Peaches, all with differing allegations, but all of them led to the same conclusion, that being Peaches was a bad friend to them. I won't be going over them in this segment, but it is important to know the existence of these videos and that they did happen because all of them led up to what is Shannon's weirdest videos to ever exist on her channel to this day. Shannon had uploaded her first video, where she had decided to go in more depth regarding her situation with Peaches, while also subtly bringing up others' personal disgruntles with Peaches as well. She had put out this image that Peaches was this huge manipulator who had a pattern of lying about other content creators with claims that held no weight.
Sure, did she purposely go out of her way to tell people that she knew I liked and admired in this community that I told her I liked and admired that I was a terrible person who deserved to be taken off the platform? Absolutely yes. Did she tell them that due to a disagreement that I had flipped out on her, which did not happen, and told people that I'm a volatile mess? Yeah, sure, but in my head that wasn't that bad. And if that was her interpretation of me, that was fine. It wasn't until I talked to other content creators who also know her, creators who had their own experiences with this same person, creators who have been lied to and about the same way, that I realized that I needed to talk about this.
It didn't end there though. CreepShow had decided to mention an old conversation she had regarding a collaboration the two of them had. Peaches had stopped interacting with her on all social media after the collaboration, which confused Shannon. CreepShow decided to then finally reach out to Peaches, to which Peaches explained that she thought Shannon was upset with her because their collaboration didn't get as many views as expected. This then later transpired into Peaches making claims that another fellow commentator, Daft Pina, had gone to Peaches and told her that her collaboration with CreepShow ruined Shannon's channel.
Had somehow convinced herself that I was super mad at her. She was convinced that I was furious and I was holding this against her, even though we had never talked about it. And nothing happened that would make her think that. So I told her directly I wasn't mad at you, and then it turned into something else. Then she went on this spiel about how Daft Pina, yes, Daft Pina, the YouTuber, had told her that the video had, quote, ruined my channel, and that I was probably mad at her for doing that.
This was then followed up with numerous other allegations of Peaches having a conversation with Shannon about her Jaclyn Hill video, to which she then claimed Peaches went around after her telling people that Shannon yelled at her during this and framed her to be some sort of lunatic. CreepShow had felt it was also necessary to reach out to Toby, as in her original video, Toby had claimed that people were too scared to confront Shannon. CreepShow wanted to make it clear with Toby that she didn't want to give off this impression that she was this scary individual who was out for blood. She had even DM'd a few other people this as well, except Peaches, because Peaches had previously mentioned to her that she wanted some space away. However, Peaches apparently reached out to CreepShow not too long after. Peaches had abruptly gone into Shannon's DMs and told her that she wasn't happy with how she painted her as a, and I quote, bitch.
When I reached out to Toby, I let them know, like, hey, I hope you truly aren't scared of me. I hope that really isn't the case, because out of everything in that video, that was what was most important to me, is that I don't want people to think I'm this terrifying person. And because Peaches had already stated that she wanted space, I didn't reach out to her until she sent me a DM, pretty much stating that me crying in my response video by me talking about the part where, once again, she approved Toby putting this in her video, where Toby said she was scared of me and she cried because of me, that I had made her look like a bitch. She responded by telling me I made her look like a bitch, and she was going to reach out again because she saw me, quote, improving, but then decided not to, since my video was very one-sided and it was a one-sided retelling of events.
Though this video didn't incorporate much evidence towards a lot of the claims Shannon presented. However, this didn't stop people from taking things at face value, as beforehand a lot of creators did that work for Shannon. Other creators had come forward with somewhat similar claims, so Shannon had ended up feeding an already angry mob without needing to back any of her claims up. This sadly, however, was just the roadmap to what was about to be something way much worse and irrational. Shannon had decided to upload a second video a month later. This video was mainly due to a document that was made in defense of Peaches, and as well Toby coming forward and calling out Shannon. You see, Toby had felt that too many people were going after Peaches at this time for unjustified reasons, and felt that this entire situation was being blown out of proportion with little to no evidence to back it up. Shannon was not happy with this.
Toby stated this: "My final commentary video will be addressing stuff with Hopeless Peaches, mostly due to the fact that she's completely destroyed right now by some clout-chasing whores, and I know no commentary channel will stand up for her, even though they think the whole situation is dumb. This is another point we making a new video about how every single person in the commentary community is a giant coward and nobody wants to stick up for anybody if they are going to get backlash of any kind, regardless of whether they think it's right or wrong." Toby is incredibly angry here that no one stood up for her when she told a victim of sexual assault that they were a bad person and she's better than them, basically. That's what this reads to me. She's still very upset about what happened to her, so that's okay. I was the only person to stand up for Peaches, and I would do it again because I know her, which is just you saying that I am biased, but go off. Also, just so it's known, Peaches had absolutely no involvement in my CreepShow Art video. Pause right here. If you used her testimony, which you did, you state you did, and you state that it was supposed to be a collab, which both you and Peaches have affirmed separately, then what you did just now, in front of the world, in front of the classroom, is lie.
This was then followed up with Shannon going through a document that was made by two small creators, SpyV and Scritus. However, Shannon portrayed this document to also be made by Peaches. This just wasn't true though. SpyV had even gone on to make their own response video where they showed that all they did was interview Peaches and asked for her side.
Shannon refers to the document written by Peaches and friends and claims she doesn't believe that Peaches did not help write the document. I mean, if you really want to believe that, fine, I can't stop you, but at least be consistent and say that Peaches helped on Spoctor's video, because we did the exact same thing that he did. We asked for her side of the story, she did and gave us any relevant screenshots, and then we, in a completely separate group chat, went over all of it and compiled it into a document. Peaches was not allowed to see the document until it was completely done, and she did not edit or comment on it at all.
Peaches had no involvement with the actual making of this document and was simply asked questions for proof to back the answer she gave. Shannon then goes on to discuss the document's coverage of DMs between her and Peaches. This was in regards to the previous claim Shannon made, where she alleged that Peaches had told her that she thought she was upset because their video collaboration ruined her channel and didn't get as many views as expected, which during this conversation, she then claims that Peaches had made previous remarks of wanting to hurt herself. Shannon was worried about this and gave Peaches her personal phone number. These DMs were also shown in the document, though of course Shannon's phone number wasn't at all shown in the actual document. Nonetheless, she then makes the assumption that because these DMs were in the document, that Peaches had shown SpyV and Scritus her personal phone number, which, by the way, Peaches didn't do that.
If the people who had these screenshots literally scrolled up, which I cannot do because once again, Peaches blocked me after she realized I had access to this conversation and she didn't want that, you would see her literally falsely accusing another YouTuber, that being What the What again, of flagging her account and causing her to be unable to make money and be unable to support herself. I would love to see this document talk about the false accusations she leveled at him, seeing as apparently they have access to the entire conversation, but I guess not. It also makes me feel entirely weird that all of these people have seen my private phone number, so that's fun. I love that.
This video was when some people started to realize Shannon's irrationalities, as this entire video was filled with assumptions and felt very exaggerated. It didn't help either that she had also claimed that Peaches was racist because she, and I quote, pissed off an angry black woman.
But literally people telling her, hey, the thing you did is bad in regards to lying about various people and situations in order to appear like an uwu victim? Yeah, that's stupid. And high-key a bit racist when we get into what you try to pull with Kai and Omnia. I mean, you have to be the white girl victim to the angry black woman and black man, right?
I would say, if anything, Shannon, you calling Omnia an angry black woman is probably more racist than Peaches disagreeing with Omnia over Twitter drama. After this video was uploaded and Peaches caught wind of CreepShow alleging that they doxed her, Peaches decided to send CreepShow an email, very upset and rightfully so, by the way, to which CreepShow was so cocky with this that she had decided to leave a pinned comment on the video to mock Peaches about the email. Peaches made a response video a while after this. I do want to clarify that Peaches had made another response video before all of this, though I don't entirely believe that its existence is important to this overall video surrounding CreepShow, as a lot of what was said there is said in this current response video, but better. Her original video response was lacking and felt like an impulse reaction rather than something that was meant to disprove allegations. In her new response video though, it's much more structured and disproves a lot of stuff that people put out against her. Peaches had gone on to share that Camilla didn't give the full picture, and it was actually Camilla herself who was bullying Peaches for her mental well-being.
I find it very distressing how back in 2018 you continued to harass me, belittle me, lie about me, and actively go out of your way to try and ruin relationships I had with other creators, even though I tried again and again to apologize to you. I had no channel back then, besides a shitty dump of a channel with just AMVs and Procreate time-lapses. I had no voice. To publicly berate me, then blame me when you got caught in a lie because you still didn't take down the merch as late as March. Yeah, it was distressing. You had a channel of nearly 700,000k and you were growing very fast during this time too. And you would demand apology after apology just to say it wasn't worth shit. You would send your moderators to tell me the only way you would leave me alone would be if I delete all my social media. Social media that I have to stress had no following. You would compare my actions to murder. You would allow your moderators to publicly wish I would die. And then, for you to come back 3 years later to actually make the claim I was a liar and bullied you so much I pushed you into hospital after you went out of your way to mock my own mental health? What a horrible claim and weight to put on somebody.
Peaches had as well denied a large portion of Shannon's claims and had called her out for the lack of evidence, though this didn't stop Peaches from admitting that she did do wrong in this situation.
To CreepShow Art, I apologise for soft blocking you after the Jacqueline Hill video. We had our differences, but we were friends, and I shouldn't have made subtweets about the situation. I understand why that would have hurt you, and it was stupid of me to do that. I'm sorry.
At the end of the day, when it comes to Peaches and Shannon though, they were both part of a toxic friendship. Though I don't think that excuses going in front of a massive audience and spreading things about someone who was your friend without proof. At that point, all you're doing is spreading rumors, which is practically ironic because CreepShow ended up doing the very thing she claimed Peaches did to her. The only difference is that she claimed Peaches went around telling other content creators. Shannon did this all publicly for the entire YouTube community to watch, and people believed almost every word she said. You see, Shannon's real art and talent don't lie with her drawings. CreepShow's art lies with her ability to take a situation in the direction she wants it to, but I will let our lovely host tell you more about that.
Thank you, Austin. I'll be leaving her channel in the description below. But for the moment, let's have a reflection of what people seem to observe at this point. Now, I wasn't particularly familiar with the hopeless Peaches capers that my good colleague has just documented, but I think it clearly demonstrated those lingering issues with CreepShow Art's demeanor and how that carried over into her content.
You gotta think before making these kinds of claims out of nowhere. It's a prime example of you letting emotions get the better of you and saying something you end up regretting later.
Many people covering this at the time attributed the behavior to her emotional nature in these situations. This was often channeled through her voice, which regularly escalated in its frequency and amplitude when dealing with topics that she clearly found triggering.
Literally out here saying that Peaches didn't participate in the garbage video you and super racist Char made, even though she edited the script, which is literally participation, but I don't.
Content that some viewed as ambient background noise, it was still designed to draw one's attention. We can all be a bit emotional and sometimes it's completely natural, but we still make the active decision whether that's substance worth keeping in those uploads. Shan continuously made the active decision to upload this content with her emotional moments, and there's a point where spontaneity can only explain so much. Like any bad apology video where someone cries excessively excessively. Although it's understandable to be emotional in those situations, you still need to convey a coherent and accurate message to your audience, even if it's biased. You can't let your emotions overly miss that to the point where you're actively delivering false information about a person or a situation, especially when this drama wasn't even the biggest deal in the first place. It's hard to establish a motive for the post that caused this. There's nothing wrong with tweeting about people who have wronged you here and there. Sometimes it's good to let off a little steam, but to go out of your way to name, shame, and initiate all this backlash against a person whose worst crime was being a bit of a shitty person is questionable. People are shitty sometimes. As long as A, they aren't still a threat to others, or B, it isn't a present pattern of behavior, there has to be some perspective to their actions taken. People sit down, watch films, sympathize with anti-heroes who've done much worse than anyone online, then open Twitter and turn on whichever person has been branded a meanie. However, at the time, plenty began to believe it was a clear pattern of behavior, which caused this domino effect of people talking about negative experiences with her like they were out of the ordinary, despite the fact that we have so many interactions and conversations that some are going to be negative, especially with people who are not necessarily mentally stable. It's very easy to take a set of negative experiences and present it as the entire story when their quote dark side is being dissected. And make no mistake, Hopeless Peaches had her reputation absolutely tarnished from this drama. As said at the start, my experience with what happened was perfunctory, but I still know that although she may have not handled it well and behaved poorly, she did not receive a hearing and was basically overrun by people who treated her like a criminal, when it's questionable whether it was even a case of public interest in the first place. This is strictly my opinion, and people can of course do whatever they want, but super serious content shouldn't be made with the purpose to solely attack others. It should be done to inform, protect, and help, even towards the subjects of our content. Sometimes we don't always manage to do that. Sometimes we have to sacrifice one of those aspects to pursue another that we view as more imperative. But if you can't answer why you peddled a public narrative other than just to go for someone who really annoyed you, I can't get behind that. Emotional moments in a video can't validate that if you're not shown the evidence to back it up. Shannon used her tone to convey how much each matter clearly meant to her. It evoked a lot of sympathy from her viewers and even benefit of the doubt from critics. The problem is that when you utilize that sort of emotion, you're going to be instigating an emotional response from your audience. And when your audience responds emotionally to misinformation that may be designed to make a person look worse than they actually are, you can cause excessive aggravation towards another person by proxy of your own misinformation. Does that mean you're solely accountable for what others do? Not at all. But if you've influenced them because you haven't been entirely honest, then you at least bear some responsibility. The fact was that even in her sentimental state, she managed to consciously omit information that would have contextualized important details, if you consider this case important at all. The rational counter-argument to this would be, well, that is what happens in a state of emotionally invoked bias. We tend to see a very one-sided perspective, and this is not entirely untrue. Nonetheless, the evidence suggests that Shannon had seen the extent of the evidence in question, and those like Just Stop seem to illustrate how she had danced around the instance that may have placed her in a quandary. The question then becomes, how irrational can one be to show bias while demonstrably being rather tactical in deciding what facets of a spectacle is beneficial to discuss at all? Something just didn't seem to quite add up in what people were concluding about Shannon's demeanor. Equally though, even if she did have a tendency to blow up trivial issues, because they were so trivial from the outset, she seldom faced any real ramifications for her shortcomings. Many involved forgot it as quickly as they waded into it, even if they had not been completely fair in their representation of the particulars, and affected parties felt the aftershock far more intensely.
I want you to know I don't think you're a bad person, but this recent video certainly is not helping you.
If anything, maybe she'd live and learn from it all. Maybe. Well, for the most part, the next few months were fairly blissful in terms of drama, at least by Shannon's standards, and her channel appeared to be in order. However, maybe it wasn't what she said on her channel that should have concerned her. I think you've all been sufficiently prepared for what we'll be talking about next, so let's move into June 2021 and talk about one of my favorite topics, the gossip forums. Gossip forums, my favorite cesspool. I'm not going to play ignorant and act like I don't end up looking over them a fair bit, given that they often contain discussion about topics that interest me. However, they're also really terrible and really bitchy. It's a contained discourse that I would always steer clear from contributing to, but they have a habit of documenting some of the community's most notorious deviants. Now, there are a variety of forums that could be discussed. However, the one I'm going to focus on is a forum by the name of Lolcal Farm. A lolcal, as we've discussed before, is someone so oblivious to the nature of the internet that they can never properly deal with the sometimes rather relentless trolling that is dished out. Lolcal Farm seems to do a pretty good job at covering these individuals, with a few side hustles of just chatting shit about anyone. Many of those who frequented the website would operate under the veil of anonymity, which is expected given what they often say wouldn't be the most welcome in civil society. This is all rather unexceptional information on the surface. Everyone talks shit about everyone else. How does this tie into the story of CreepShow Art? Well, there was a thread on CreepShow which had been operational since October 2020. Though that is of some interest, there's something more specific, and in June 2021, one of the admins decided that the veil of anonymity would be lifted over a certain few accounts. All of those accounts had commented on drama involving CreepShow, and many of those that she knew and was associated with. But there was one more curious detail they had in common. Yes, according to the moderator in question, they were all operated by Shannon. How did they conclude this? Well, it comes down to the IP on these accounts. Short for Internet Protocol, it's often used by those online to identify the general location and possibly identity of a user. Most of the time, a person's IP is not public information because it can lead to revelations regarding the person's whereabouts, and we do not endorse that. However, in this case, given that they felt Shannon's behavior was careening out of hand, they decided to put a stop to it. An announcement post was made in the thread stating that although CreepShow Art's post into the forum had not been exactly subtle prior, that she crossed a line when she posted her sibling's social media to deflect criticism from her. That's pretty shady stuff for sure. But was it worth lifting the masquerade for? Well, it certainly is when you realize that her sibling was in the ICU, short for intensive care unit, for treatment when Shannon went into a lolcow forum and linked her Twitter. And that's barely the half of it. Amongst the rest of the post documented were various slighted comments directed towards people who many assumed were Shannon's friends, including D'Angelo Wallace, who is a callous call-out creator, Ready to Glare, who's sucking up to Shannon's clout, and Edward's Generation, who simps for terrible people. Another time, while she was uploading videos defending Corp's husband from certain toxic fandoms, she was supposedly posting in a thread that attempted to dox him, ridiculing his fans, and stirring the pot in general. Obviously, if that's what she says about her friends, you can only guess what she says about her adversaries, including people like Hopeless Peaches. And in a way, it makes sense given her publicly expressed feelings on them, but it's still rather underhanded given how much animosity was already being spread during the situation. To stoke fire under an alias while acting like you're taking the high road is nothing short of villainous, especially when such content is known to mobilize viewers from that position. She posts links to people's social medias with the implication that they should go on there and keep giving them shit. All that wholesome stuff.
A male. She was not trans. She had never experienced body dysmorphia or felt what it was like to be in the wrong body or dealt with any of the complex issues mentally and physically that trans people go through. None of that had happened with her. No, she was just a cis woman who was a moron.
However, it doesn't stop there, as many were quick to observe her rather flagrant use of slurs in posts to the forum, which once again is certainly not out of place for a website like that, but is rather contradictory to our often socially sensitive readings of situations and assumed advocacy for issues like body positivity. The person who called artists racist for drawing somewhat poorly executed depictions of characters has been firing off epithets fairly casually on her alt accounts. She also used it to mysteriously predict what Shannon would be doing next, often in what seemed like an attempt to hype up whatever drama she was embroiled in. She'd brag about her own friends from that third-person perspective, talk about how people may be hesitant to make videos, and how she may weaponize her clout in these scenarios. She also spoke quite harshly about herself, which one could typically chalk up to a concealed sense of self-loathing or the attempt to throw off any suspicion, but in this case combine it with messages about her sibling, and the hypothesis would seem to indicate that she was stirring up hate towards herself, which she'd then play off during conflicts. She'd regularly enact what I call the anti-flex, which is basically a way to attack herself while still emphasizing some aspect of privilege she possessed. If you did that in your own character, you'd probably be called out for being a braggart, but it's much easier to do so when you appear to be talking about someone else. Hypothetically, this is quite the scheme, because a lot of people really don't like being harassed online. However, for those who can manage it, who don't have the conscience to care, then it becomes very easy to use that harassment as ammunition for your own case, and to deflect legitimate criticism that may be targeted at you. Other behavior is a bit harder to explain, including one where she has an argument with herself about herself after posting DMs with herself. This fictional small YouTuber is mad that Shannon was rude to her in the DMs, makes generally garbage content, and is now holding a grudge against her. This equally fictional respondent contests this and argues that Shannon behaved completely properly given this small YouTuber's demeanor, and that they were clearly attention-seeking. All I'll say is that both sides may have a point. The only explanation I can provide here, though, is that it was a slow week, and the exchange does make Shannon look marginally more favorable than her manufactured hater. Marginally. It's a forum on a trash-talking site. There's not much at stake here. We could go through every individual post and break it down, but all I'll say is it definitely threw her credibility as a commentator into contention, but it also just made people question her credibility as a person and a friend. However, the question still remained: how much can you prove from an IP? Was there an alternative explanation for these escapades that didn't indict Shannon as the perpetrator of these posts? Well, let's hear what she had to say. On June the 5th, 2021, less than a week after the post of the gossip forum had emerged, and as quickly as they garnered traction elsewhere, Shannon took to the YouTube community tab to address the claims that were being leveled against her. Now, she had a few options in approaching these allegations, dependent on her innocence, of course. She could provide the receipts that would exonerate her, she could cast a reasonable amount of doubt on it to make people more skeptical in analysis of the evidence, or she could own up and accept accountability for her actions. In this case, she chose the second option, which is probably the most challenging choice, because you're leaving it open-ended and down to your audience's interpretation of exactly who to believe. You're not providing that closure which allows drama to conclude. At the same time, she still had the opportunity to swing momentum in her favor. So what did her explanation entail? The post claims that she was not the one behind these forum contributions, such as the doxing. After all, it is so antithetical to what she stands for as a creator, she couldn't have that on her conscience. As a matter of fact, another person had been committing these offenses and attempting to mirror it onto Shannon's account by, quote, spoofing my IP, doxing my family members, writing things about myself and my friends, sending me death threats from other accounts, making false accounts to spam my comment sections, spamming the comment sections of my friends saying hateful things about me in order to get them to drop me, and just all around doing what she did years ago. Whoever would perform such a heinous act? Well, for those familiar with Shannon's channel, the person responsible for this behavior wasn't a name completely foreign to them, a person who went by Amy, who Shannon had previously believed to be on good terms with, however must have recently turned on her once more. This goes back to January 2019, when Shannon published a video covering this situation under the title, I Was Stalked for 8+ years, Storytime, where Shannon explains in much more depth how her friendship with Amy had turned sour and led to a continuous wave of harassment and provocation on her former friend's part.
After I transferred over to Facebook, the emails started up again. They would talk about my friends, make digs at me, and this time they were a lot more effective. It was like, in the time in which this person wasn't fucking with me by sending me emails, they had taken a course about how to harass people and just fucking passed that course with flying colors. It was a lot, and I was fucking overwhelmed, and so again, I isolated myself. And at this point, I had really only ruled out one of my friends as being someone who wouldn't do this. And she was essentially the only person I trusted for a very, very, very long time.
It's a very long and detailed video, and I don't really seek to go into too many specifics. However, it definitely covers that more personal side of Shannon that many people in the day took to, and showed a more vulnerable side of her.
This person was saying shit that, as much as I didn't want it to be true, it was fucking true. I did self-harm. I did have suicidal thoughts. I didn't think I was worthy of my friends. I did believe that everyone around me hated me and thought terribly of me. It wasn't fucked up because it was all accurate and it was all true.
In Shannon's post, she expresses confusion at how Amy has managed to pull this off, and is equally confused as to her motives. However, she is steadfast that she wants this to be resolved as soon as possible, and promises to send a cease and desist her way to make sure that these antics are brought to an end immediately. After all, she doesn't want anyone else negatively affected by this. She felt the need to put this update out because it's not fucking true that she'd ever do something like that. And that although she understands if nobody believes her, she hopes that her record on this matter has shown itself to be consistent, and therefore, this testimony adds up. Surely with this alternative explanation with a clear timeline, she has at least provided an account that seems more congruent with how people know her, which may be cause to question the original theory posited by the forum admins, right? Alas, an appeal to a behavioural argument can only work if the version of events seems sensible, and many began to disbelieve aspects, particularly on the IP front, which is one of the key pieces of evidence proffered by the lolcow team. It receives a fleeting mention on Shannon's community post, which as aforementioned asserted that this Amy character had been imitating her IP to shift blame onto her lap. To those unfamiliar with IPs, this claim would seem quite unfalsifiable, although contentious. However, people who are more technologically cultured swiftly descended on the holes within the besieged creator's exposition. These emphasize the fact that besides it already being extremely difficult to mimic someone's IP, as a person's IP often changes with time and is dependent on the devices one uses, it makes the likelihood that a stalker had continuously tracked her IP even more unlikely, in fact, nearly impossible. In essence, a stalker of this degree would have needed to have used her devices to even begin mimicking her behavior, which we know hasn't happened given Shannon's own claims, so she kind of backed herself into a corner on that one. Some also found it strange that she immediately assumed this was the doing of her mystery stalker, and not the many other possibilities that could be drawn from such a bizarre situation. In a way, her specificity became her downfall, as she was shown up as clearly lying about certain details, and if she was lying about the explanation relating to who committed the incident in question, the natural assumption was that she was probably the guilty party. This only makes the community post more awkward to read, especially given how she uses a lot of linguistic devices to convey an upfront nature, such as that acceptance that people may not believe it, and even the expletives that would convey that sort of unfiltered emotion. Its contrivance couldn't be more crystalline. It wasn't long until many critical comments appeared in the section of her community post chastising her for her dishonesty, but also requesting some transparency. Her fans, although clearly possessing affection for their creator, were also conscious that this was not the truth, and that they clearly deserved better from someone who thought she cared about them. With the deception of these exploits on show, the question began to manifest of what other lies had been concocted on the CreepShow Art channel. After all, the scapegoat of this scenario, Amy, was an individual who Shannon acknowledged more than readily as a real person for over 2 years. If she wasn't this bogeyman that CreepShow made her out to be, who was she? In the week following, a tweet went up from a certain creator asking if Amy had been mentioned prior to October 2018, with the theory that this character had been inspired by a conversation that they had had with her. This creator was Emily Artful, a person mentioned multiple times in Shannon's supposed lolcow posts. It's clear the two knew of each other, but how deep did this rabbit hole go? Well, if you shall permit, I'd like to bring another friend, my exemplary colleague and creator, ItzRooster, to break down the details of what followed, in possibly one of the most aberrant twists yet. Take it away.
So James asked Scotland's finest to investigate the whole Amy situation. So here I am, procrastinating my uni deadlines to talk about CreepShow Art. Help me. So in early January of 2019, Shannon uploaded an hour-long video titled, "I was stalked for 8+ years." In this video, Shannon details her horror story of being on the receiving end of a stalker for almost a decade of her life, using her platform to share her story of an issue estimated to affect somewhere between
6 to 7.5 million people in just the US alone, with further disturbing statistics suggesting that 1 in 6 women have experienced some form of stalking in their lifetime.
Stalking and many other factors why women don't feel safe walking home at night. But what about Shannon? Well, enter stage left Emily Artful, who released a counter video against Shannon and her video that sent the internet into a meltdown. Shannon's "I was stalked" video has a runtime just shy of 60 minutes, so let's condense this video down and then compare it to Emily Artful's story. Because an hour is a long time. You could watch one of TRO's videos in that. No, you couldn't. You could not, actually.
Hi, if you read the title of this video, then you know that it's going to be about harassment and online stalking. There are a lot, and I mean a lot, of videos on the internet where the person is crying about this story and trying to retell how it sucks, and I can tell you absolutely firsthand, it does.
Shannon's opening statement claims she'd been on the receiving end of a stalker for the past 8+ years, but knew who did this to her and that the whole thing was over. She then goes into more details of her terror tale as follows. She met her first online friend, Amy, who had a much cooler life than her.
Her life was the shit, and mine was shit. And I was so friggin' jealous. And her parents allowing her to have a cell phone when mine wouldn't. And I just had basically nothing.
However, Amy was getting more guys than she was, which led Shannon down the path of jealousy, resulting in her starting to tell some porcupines. She began to manipulate her life in fantasy tales to try level up to this new friend she made online. These tales included love interests in Shannon's life, with some lies going as far as claims of men climbing through Shannon's window to meet up with her at the crack of dawn.
I made a dumb decision. When talking to Amy, I started full online and making up shit to fit in with her, which is exactly what Disney Channel tells you you shouldn't do because lying is wrong and don't ever do it. Yes, I know, Zendaya, I've heard you a million times. But in order to fit in with Amy and seem cooler, I just started lying about everything, which was not a smart move to do because I am in fact a shitty liar. I won't remember my lies very well, and I tend to end up exposing my damn self, which is why I try to keep my shit as honest as possible in my real life.
As time went on, her lies got more complex and irrational, to the point where she started mixing her fake partners and companions with real-life friends. Amy caught on that Shannon was being dishonest, but instead of giving it up and admitting it, Shannon instead made her lies even more far-fetched. These lies got so out of control that Amy wanted to fight her real-life friends because Shannon had orchestrated real people into fake problematic scenarios.
I wove these like intricate tales into my life. I had one character who was my next door neighbor, who was essentially like a hot Archie Andrews kind of guy, who was sweet and charming, and our windows faced each other, and at the end of the night we would look out at each other and smile. And I named him George, specifically after George Weasley, who I had the fattest crush on.
She then made her MySpace account, and if you remember that, then how's your 30s treating you? On this new platform, Amy noticed Shannon's friend Sage was on her top friends list, which annoyed Amy, because Sage was a friend of Shannon's who had been bitched about. Amy was confused to why Sage was on that list, after Shannon had made claims of problematic behaviour from them. Sage then received a threatening email from Amy, claiming that they wanted to kill them. This scenario led to a tearful phone call with Sage to Shannon, who was troubled about the email. Shannon decided that enough was enough, so wrote a long email to Amy, coming clean with everything. Amy did not take this well and was understandably angered by Shannon's explanation. After this, Shannon claimed she blocked Amy. Things went quiet for a few months until they received an email from a fake account under a phony name along the lines of John Smith or something. And it ain't David Tennant, trust me. This email was insulting her friends and providing real-life information about Shannon. Then every couple of days she got more and more, with all the emails ending with the phrase, kill yourself. She then switched to Facebook and wasn't too clever with her privacy settings on this account. She continued to get emails for months upon months. During these pressing times, she also briefly describes her battles with homelessness.
I was told in the comments things like I wasn't really homeless, that I was lying, that I was making it sound worse than it was, and that I had it so much easier than so many other people, and therefore I shouldn't be able to talk about it at all. That because I had my car, because I had my husband, because we had chosen to be homeless because we genuinely couldn't afford an apartment with the debt we had at the time, that I was not technically really homeless, that it wasn't as valid as people who had been displaced, and I was just using it to seem cool online.
Her boyfriend, Anthony, then started getting texts from Amy, reading that they should break up with Shannon. When he brought this up with her, she returned to her old tricks and lied to Anthony. Anthony knew this was all fabricated, which led to Shannon eventually breaking down after realizing that she had been trapped, forcing to confess everything to Anthony. Amy wasn't backing down though, however. Shannon was threatened with revenge, also claiming that Amy has threatened her to get her fired from her job. You might be thinking, go to the police, make YouTube videos. Well, she admits that she was so shit scared she slept on her bathroom floor some nights. But you also may be thinking at this point, where's the evidence, as I haven't presented any of yet? Well, Shannon claims to have deleted every email she received from Amy, rendering any efforts to take this situation to the police useless. During these stressful times, she was encouraged to search her emails for any form of evidence.
I logged into every email I had, which was only 3 at the time, and I searched. I looked up keywords, I tried to scour through it, and I didn't find anything from those emails I was actually looking for. What I did find though were those 10 emails that Amy had sent to me after she realized what I had done and what I had been lying about. And the only way I could describe that moment after finding those emails and reading them again it was like a Jimmy Neutron brain blast happened. Because finally, after fucking years, I put 2 and 2 together and realized that holy shit, it was Amy the whole time.
She found Amy's social media accounts with one that was still active. So she decided to finally take accountability, kind of. They then video called and Amy came clean with everything, claiming she took her marriage stress and anger out on Shannon. Shannon tells Amy that she can't forgive her or be friends, but they stay in touch. She then told her audience that it wasn't really that deep and not to go out their way trying to find out who she was, also clarifying that she asked Amy permission to share the story. After this, Shannon received support from her fans in the comments, and I'm sure from friends behind the scenes too.
It was so easy for me to look her up with that limited information, and I don't want to potentially give you all a way to find her. Last time I shared emails on the internet, that's exactly what happened, and I'm not in the business of messing up people's lives. So her only request about me making this video was for it not to be traced back to her and her family, and I really do take that seriously.
But nothing else really came from it. Well, I mean, obviously it did. Until June 12th, 2021, when, in light of lolcow allegations and their own research, a creator by the name of Emily Artful decided to upload a video titled CreepShow Art has always been this way.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily. If you're not familiar with who I am, I have been making art content here on YouTube for the past 6 years. For the majority of those 6 years and several years prior, I had been facing stalking, harassment, and threats from one very recognizable source. For many years, I had no idea who this person was. I had speculations, but they were pretty far off. And because of that, I had to endure that abuse. I went to the police, I was turned away. I spoke to an attorney, they told me it's not going to be worth it taking it to court. This story is long, so I recommend you watch it at 1.5 speed if you can. It's long because this stalking campaign has lasted the better part of a decade. And while I didn't know who my stalker was before, now I know who my stalker is. My stalker is Shannon, better known as CreepShow Art, and what I believe to be her current husband, Anthony Parker, who is also my abusive ex-partner. I have to say, for legal purposes, that everything in this video is alleged. I just encourage people to look at the evidence and form their own opinions. I also want to say I originally censored Anthony's name in this video. I called him Andrew, just kind of out of a habit. But I decided I'm not going to do that anymore. His handle online is Anthony Parker, and he raped me, and he emotionally abused me and manipulated me when I was most vulnerable. And for the better part of the decade, he tried to make my life a living hell. Thank you everyone, and here's the video.
Emily prefaces her story by admitting that when this situation started, she was a toxic person and often made crude comments towards others. In her own words, an anti-SJW pick-me girl who was often fatphobic and would slut-shame others. Emily admits that she was that person in the past and still is, but has grown up as a person since then. So this all started when Emily started making music and had a gig booked in the Nickel City venue, who let any shitty bands perform, in Emily's own words.
I was a gig musician making shit all doing that because I still lived at home and I was a student. I took a gig performing at Nickel City Arcade in San Jose because they used to allow the shittiest of bands to perform in their literal birthday room.
After performing in their birthday room, she met a man who attended the gig, and his name was Anthony. Emily and Anthony hit it off well with each other and ended up in a relationship that Emily describes as toxic. During this time of her life, Emily had a big drug problem and struggled heavily with it. Emily claims Anthony showed signs of being abusive early on, often punching walls in anger and thinking he and his small friend group from school were the intellectuals. Things began to get progressively worse after Anthony spotted a comment that Emily posted on a gay friend's post. The comment was complimenting a friend and wasn't flirtatious in any way. However, Anthony was deeply insecure and couldn't understand this. It's also worth knowing that when this happened, at the time Anthony had been cheating on Emily secretly, as he was often flirty with other women and sent naughty photos to people too. In anger, he got one of his friends, Brandon, to send Emily horrible abusive messages, going as far to threaten to curb stomp her. After the breakup, they decided to keep a professional relationship in the arts industry, and Anthony wanted Emily to provide vocals for one of his songs, and she was keen to do so.
Andrew actually reached back out to me down the road, basically saying, hey, sorry for how things ended. We should be friends now. Then, of course, as all codependent relationships do, we entered into this kind of weird middle ground flirtationship. That became unhealthy, so I decided to kind of end it, kind of step back away from that. Then he expressed interest in having a professional relationship, having me sing on one of his tracks.
However, when watching back a music video of Anthony she was acting in, she heard the vocals of another female who she took a quick dislike to, claiming to Anthony that she could sing a lot better and that person behind the microphone wasn't good.
Stupid feeling that I know you know I know we know I can't see. Run away, close your eyes, blame yourself, count to 5. Will I ever see? I never seem to wonder why I never wondered if all I needed was a hug.
However, this person happened to be Shannon. Emily reflects back on her opening statement here, admitting that the comment she made was toxic and rude, but claims this behaviour was caused due to abusive male figures being in her life at the time, alongside Anthony, but also admits that during this period of her life, she was heavily drugged up and trapped in addiction. After this comment was made, this started a long chain of events to follow.
What was interesting is when I started working professionally with him is when I started noticing some like really negative comments across all my social media. And at this point, the Emily Artful channel wasn't a thing yet. I just had like random social media accounts. I think I had a Minecraft account, an anime, I did short films, I had like a separate art account that was unrelated, a music account, and I started noticing a lot of really negative comments.
Though negative comments are common on YouTube, these ones seemed suspicious. She also began to get friend requests on Facebook from people with mutual friends, so she accepted them, not thinking much about it. Emily believes that Anthony and Shannon were working together to try and get more information about her, but notes that she isn't certain that Shannon was involved at this point. Emily's Facebook account was hacked after it was phished, locking her out completely. And phishing is a tactic to hack people by seeming trustworthy with a link shared. These are very common nowadays. You've probably had these before, where a friend sends you a sussy link with a message along the lines of like, "Is this you in this video?" Oh shit, it got a virus now. But this hack led to compromising photos being stolen from her account in private logs. But some of these photos were from when Emily was a minor. When she expressed this concern to the account that they were storing CP, they just called Emily a liar and instead baited her by putting them alongside other photos in a photo bucket to taunt her and hold them over her head.
But I believe at this point, potentially, Shannon was working with Andrew to try to get up as much information about me as possible. Now, they ended up phishing me and locking me out of that original Facebook account. Now, I had that original Facebook account since I was a minor, since Facebook came out. And hidden in the messages of that account were some compromising photographs. Now, most of them were of me as an adult, but unfortunately, there were a few of me as a minor. And I tried to express that to my stalker several times, but they just disregarded it and said that I was a liar.
The comments continued to surface, but this time they were a lot more personal and direct towards her physical appearance. At this time, she had been struggling with an ED and was underweight and overweight at points in her life, which the comments made digs at. There were also some comments suggesting that she was transgender in a transphobic delivery.
Let me just say right now, the #1 insult, this is how I know it's her, across the board, because, you know, everybody has haters, but I know it's her when I'm called pre-op or TRANNY slur, or when did you get your operation and do you still have boy parts down there? Just lots of incredibly transphobic insults.
Emily at this point in life was not in control due to drug problems, but was on the mend, so decided to try and make things work by getting a job. On the road to recovery, she was sabotaged by her harassers, who found out where she was working and sent them an email posing as a past client, claiming that they lost her business and attached photos of Emily in compromising positions. Emily was then fired from her job and ended up on the street for a short period of time. Continuing her path to recovery though, things looked up when she met someone new and moved in with them, and also secured a new job and began to settle down after having a child with her partner. Anthony and allegedly Shannon did everything they could think of to try to continue to fuck with her by trying to find out where her new workplace was, and at the time only knowing it was a restaurant. To try and find this information out, they stole Emily's friend's photos on Facebook and created a fake account posing as a new account due to the last one being hacked, and had added Emily's friends too to look more legit. Emily believed this, so accepted the friend request, but then she noticed her posts were oddly sus, asking people if they knew any nice restaurants in the area.
Hey, does anybody know of any really cool, this specific type of cuisine restaurants in this specific location? And at that point, I'm like, you are not my friend. And so I blocked them. I knew right away that they were trying to find out where I worked. They wanted to try to bait me to be like, yeah, I work here, so that they could call and get me fired from another job.
And after a report, the account was removed. Things were looking up though. She was healing, moving forward in life, and soon started her Emily Artful channel. Unfortunately for Emily, things were only going to get worse though. And this started when she noticed an increase of negative comments on her channel. And for the first time, Emily realized that she had a stalker. After this happened, she began to notice comments which were specifically detailed about CreepShow Art, who at the time Emily didn't know was Shannon. She decided to approach Shannon about it, politely. Emily claims that at the time she couldn't find anyone else apart from Shannon using the series title, but admits that she was still green on the platform and perhaps didn't look hard enough.
Hi Shannon, my name is Emily and I have a channel on YouTube called Emily Artful. It's been brought to my attention that you have a series with the exact same name as a series I created 3 years ago called Sketchbook Storytime. I'm going to guess this was most likely 100% by accident or by coincidence, but I put my heart and soul into my series and I'd really appreciate if you were able to change the name of your Storytime videos. You are completely within your right not to, as it's your channel and you can do with it as you please, but from one artist to another, I hope you'll understand how it can hurt my business. I hope you understand my requests and I hope you don't think I'm angry. Things like this happen all the time. I figure it's just a coincidence. Thank you, Emily. And Shannon responded, sorry man, I watched Lehman Raptor on YouTube and she has a series titled the same name and she gave me a go-ahead. I'll just label them as Storytime since that's all it is, but I appreciate you letting me know your concern. Looking into it, there are quite a few accounts using the same name for similar series, kind of like Get Ready For Me for beauty YouTubers almost. I think at the very least you might have started a trend, which is commendable. Sorry I made you uncomfortable in any way, my dude.
After this, Emily followed CreepShow on Instagram and was stunned to see a drawing on the account that scarily resembled Anthony a lot, but confirmed this when the post had Anthony tagged in it. At this point, Emily was worried about Shannon because she knew Anthony well and how abusive he had been towards her. She decided to unfollow CreepShow. Emily claims here that she doesn't have much receipts because at the time she just wanted to block the pair and push them away as far as possible, until she had a conversation with a lawyer in 2017 who told her to do the exact opposite and collect evidence against them. Emily had started a new series, Sketchbook Storytime, where she talked about past experiences of her life, and one of her videos went semi-viral, as she called it, so she posted the achievement onto Twitter, and as a thank you to her fans. After she tweeted this, she was followed by Anthony, who proceeded to reply to the achievement, accusing her of buying views, and also calling her out for blocking him too. Emily noticed just short moments after this was tweeted towards her, a new account DM'd her under the handle NotViralEmily, saying the same sort of thing and sending pictures of a Social Blade page. Now, for the non-nerds out there, a Social Blade page is a place where a YouTuber can take tabs of their past analytics and growth. Essentially, it's a platform for YouTubers to jerk themselves off to. Emily tried to level with Anthony and reach his softer side because she was terrified of him, because he'd mentioned dark things such as shooting up schools before, going as far to plot out who he would have killed. She genuinely was scared he was going to come and kill her. Emily was haunted to the point which led her to write up a statement that if anything mysterious happened to her, it was most likely Anthony who did it.
He says back, harassing? No, I've only posted in what my accounts are, like what has my face on it. And I'm not angry, I was just curious. I figured maybe if I get more ridiculous, I'd get a response. I wanted to see where your stuff went, which is why I was bummed you blocked me. But no, I'm not angry at all. Thank you for the reason though, much appreciated. Good luck out there.
After this situation happened, she began to suspect Anthony was the one who had been stalking her for the past few years, but couldn't prove it at this point. So she decided to plan out a trap to lay out for Anthony to gather evidence. She set this trap by posing as a hater of her own channel, messaging Anthony with a trackable link, baiting him to click on it. He was baited. Because Emily had two mutual friends with Anthony, she knew where he was living at the time, and the link brought her to the location of where Anthony lived in San Jose, California. As I mentioned previously, things got progressively worse, but things took a new level when she received anxiety-drilling Snapchats from a sock puppet account, as the stalker was now in her town.
One day I just received a completely random Snapchat photograph of what looked like a specific square in the city that I lived in, with some nonsensical text overlaid on top. I don't have the initial Snapchat because I just kind of froze in panic, but I do have the response to that Snapchat. I wrote, "Are you in my city?" And Kilgore Trout is the name that they chose this time. And they said,
"Somewhere, I suppose, in its labyrinth."
And then you could see I started typing back, "You are fucking insane." Now, I'm sorry for the ableist language I was using here. I was so freaked out. You guys have no idea the level of fear that I had in this moment. I was 100% convinced that this person, Andrew or Shannon or whoever, was in my city and they were going to hurt me. You can see I said, "Answer me. You drove all the way here?" And they said,
I don't have a driver's license yet. My parents drove me here.
Emily notes here that they started scattering breadcrumbs of the stalker being a potential minor by claiming their parents drove them to the town, almost in an attempt to draw Emily's suspicions away of it being Anthony. Emily also claims that post-high school, the pair had conversations discussing kidnapping people who bullied him in school and torturing them. At the same time, Emily was trying to be kind to Anthony and find his soft spot once more, as she was genuinely concerned for her own well-being. Telling Anthony not to come to her house, trying to scare him off by claiming she had a security dog and a loaded weapon ready to use for protection. Emily then asked him if he was near the loft, a venue, as she recognised the architecture of her own town.
There is, alas, only one loft, infinite copies of voids upon voids, reflected as it were into the greater void of perception, that which is named but not known, in which loft is one of any possible combination of voids, infinite yet also distinct.
He followed with more snaps, criticising her channel by essentially saying, "You're adding shit content to the internet," in this nonsensical text he wrote towards her.
All art reflects the greater void of human limitations. Alas, Mother's Day cards and subscriber drawings are no exception. Only the mind-bending, thumb-bending video can transcend this void through its sheer bendery and avant-gardeness.
It's important to note here that he mentioned subscriber drawings, and something key to mention, how did he get this Snapchat account? How was he able to send it to them? Emily answers this on another content creator's video, claiming that she was public with her Snapchat, and she did this as she used it as an outlet for fans to send their own fan art to her. So this explains how Anthony was able to contact Emily without being a friend. Emily explains that she knows who is behind the Snapchat account, and that it was Anthony because he clicked on the link she sent, to which again, he responds in more gibberish and takes no accountability or even defends himself. Further down the path, the Rewired Soul drama happened. YouTubers such as Primink have covered this in much more depth, but the main issue with him was that he started out as a mental health channel and Emily befriended him, but then he started making videos about YouTubers' breakdowns and diagnosing them. This in itself is very distasteful, but he made this worse by making multiple videos on them.
Just a few examples. He has over 500 videos just like these about every YouTuber you can think of, and these videos aren't like a one-off and done. He has 65 videos on Shane Dawson, 45 videos on Jake Paul, 16 videos on Tana Mojo, 15 videos on Trisha Paytas. It goes on and on. At some point, it becomes kind of obsessive. Just imagine, some random guy on the internet making 65 videos on how you need to get help in therapy or about how your relationships are failing.
But this didn't stop another Sock Puppet account from DMing her a lot of abuse and threats because Emily had previous associations with him.
Since I had publicly, I think I had just tweeted at him a few times, so people were aware that him and I had talked. During that whole debacle, I got a DM on Twitter from someone named Datboy, and they say, "Uh-oh, dear, looks like you're friends with a fraud. Do you want to be hurt in the worst possible way? Somebody is a bad mommy. Maybe we let everyone know how bad of a mommy you are. Keep telling people you're sober, girl. Maybe if you say it enough, people will believe it. Have fun endorsing your fraud, druggy bitch. Have fun faking your sobriety for your mindless followers. They believe you, but no one else does, my dear. You bad mommy. I've got receipts, druggy bitch," with a winky face.
Emily also mentions comments made towards her children that seem like threats against them or threats to get her kids taken away from her, and she backs this up with another incident with Shannon. Emily did a Halloween shoot with a short 3-series videos, claiming it to be fun and off-brand compared to her usual content. After she posted these, she noticed the same comment being spammed, claiming to be grossed out that Emily would monetize her kids, trying to compare this fleeting moment to people who very much monetize their children.
But for some reason, I just kept getting the same comment over and over and over. Oh my God, aren't you guys so like grossed out that she's trying to monetize her kids? Like, oh my gosh, she's just shoving her kids down our throat. And I'm sorry, to have that like accusation lobbed at me was frustrating.
Emily then made a Redbubble shirt with her son on it to keep one for herself and send one to her dad. She claims to have never advertised this and it was a private project. This was a point that Shannon made on a lolcow post trying to further slander Emily that she was a disgusting human for making merch out of her children and essentially tried to call her out for exploiting them.
I never made that public, like I never advertised it as merch. I put that in my Redbubble shop and ordered 2 of those shirts, one to send to my dad and one to send to my best friend because obviously they love my son.
So somewhere between the Rewired Soul incident and the lolcow Halloween situation, Emily received a DM from an account under Britta Filter. The account claimed that Emily did not know her, but that Britta knew her. In short, the DM details that her brother was a fan of hers and has archives on his computer of Emily's media, claiming that he has an obsession, pages of screen names and information on Emily, and info that someone wouldn't want to know. The account said that he had harassed her with accounts under Ava, which sounds like an autocorrection for Aja, the person behind the Not Viral Emily account. The message continues claiming that he had many sock puppet accounts and even reached out to her followers. She claims she found all this while using her computer for schoolwork, and that's when she found everything, and that she has taken the laptop to his parents and has decided to encourage her brother to take a mental health facility and to be cut off from this. She apologizes on behalf and claims that he was just a kid at 15.
I am sorry for doing this anonymously, but because my brother is a child, my parents have told me not to speak out about this with anyone else outside of family. I know that must be inherently frustrating for you, but it's important to me that you at least know that this problem was seen and will be taken care of.
In response to the long-winded DM, Emily asked to solidify the statement by asking the girl to come into a video call as she found the information being presented very suspicious, claiming it to be very strange that he wrote every little specific detail, such as him getting Emily fired from her job.
Would you be able to do me a favor? So I know this is all real. I need to see/talk to you on video chat, Snapchat, Instagram, Skype, it doesn't matter. Because all this information seems suspicious to me. It's exactly what's happened to me to a T. Obviously with a huge handful of things missing and some things that I didn't even know that they had on me.
At the time, this had been happening for 5 years, making the boy in question 10 years old. Would a 10-year-old even be capable of doing any of this? Emily claims to be certain it's Anthony and doubts that they were able to fulfill her video chat request. And sure enough, the account responded bluntly, stating that if she doesn't believe her, then that's fine. And also swiftly declined, claiming that her parents aren't comfortable with that.
As for how we know he got you fired and information of the like, he has a video of you crying where you state someone got you fired and text documents of him taking credit for it. Though I doubt I will be able to convince you that this is legitimate, I do hope that you find peace with this, and I understand the trust is not here.
After this happened, Emily uploaded a video where she discussed a YouTuber who had caused her a lot of problems. That wasn't about Shannon, but she later had to private it due to it causing a lot of issues with her friends, but she noticed a sprinkle of sock puppet accounts claiming it to be about CreepShow Art. CreepShow Art, in fact.
Shannon's post reads, "The people linking me to Emily Artful's video, I've seen it, and no, it wasn't me," plays Shaggy in background. Also, less exciting, and something I might open up more about, but for about 12 years now, I've been harassed online by the girl who catfishes me. I know it's her because she ended up admitting to it last year when I called her out on it, saying it was because she was stressed and didn't have another outlet for it. Also, she felt betrayed because I stopped responding to her emails after a while. Because of her harassing me, my boyfriend, my friends, and sometimes going as far as to try to get me fired, I don't trust people very easily online. Isn't that a coinky-dink? That right there is the most passive-aggressive shit I have ever read, and is also one of the many breadcrumbs that she started leaving behind that she had a quote-unquote stalker named Amy.
Shannon came across as super manipulative in trying to get herself out of this messy situation in her response, apologizing for going off, but Emily wasn't having any of it. She snapped and confronted her. Emily opens bluntly asking if it was her or Anthony stalking her, and compiles the proof we have gathered already in this text. She also mentioned that she baited the Lily Singh account with another IP link, which led her to the new location which they had moved to, and that one of the IPs she had previously tracked her back to a library, which does line up with Anthony's homeless lifestyle.
Now, interestingly enough, one of the IPs that I had tracked to where they had lived before was from a library. Come to find out that when Shannon and Andrew were living in their car, they had used a library for their internet access, which I now know from watching some of Shannon's older videos.
Because when you live in a car, you don't have very basic things. For a living room, you have a Starbucks or a library because you can sit there essentially the entire day and no one cares.
So what our schedule basically was on a day-to-day basis was basically to get food at about 9 a.m. or so and make our way over to the library and set up so we could essentially work till about 2 or 3 and then get food again and then come back and work till about, I don't remember if it was 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. when it closed.
Shannon responds bluntly with, literally neither of us do. Emily responds by asking why her boyfriend went off at her and accused her of buying views and subs. Shannon is apologetic that those things happened, but bitter that Emily would accuse them of stalking, claiming that it isn't cool. In an effort to try and cover up the sub-buying comments, Shannon claims that she herself had received DMs saying similar, and that other art accounts had too, and claimed that the account had actually messaged her with dirt on Emily from before Emily Artful. But then Emily pleads with Shannon for the pair to leave her alone. Finding it strange how she had zero contact with Anthony, then all of a sudden he's blowing her up on Twitter. Shannon continues by insisting it's not Anthony and offers a Skype or FaceTime call with Emily. Shannon again denies the allegations, claiming she'd received DMs from an account something like Filter. Now if we go back to this sus account that DM'd Emily under Brita Filter, this does seem oddly convenient, and how the fuck would she remember that? Shannon then tries to level with Emily, exclaiming that she gets where she's coming from, detailing her story of how she was harassed by a girl called Amy, who catfished her for 12 years. Emily replies here, dismissing her attempts to cover up by claiming she's in the works filling out a restraining order. She says she's taken this to the police with the evidence, but will not press charges as she doesn't want to hurt or ruin anyone's life. Emily then details the progress of the private investigation that would IP block them from contact and makes a point that if it's not her, then she has nothing to worry about. Emily, possibly in fear, starts to backtrack and dismiss herself by saying that if she's wrong about this, then she does apologize. At this point, Emily is talking to a brick wall. Shannon tells Emily to go ahead with the restraining order, but once again mentions the music video, which confused Anthony. She uses this in an effort to continue to try and clean their names. Emily finds it strange that she was able to recall the music video so easily, considering it was a long time ago. Emily softens for Shannon furthermore by expressing worries she had been associated with Anthony due to the abuse she suffered. Shannon once more tries to persuade Emily that Anthony would never do that due to the sheer amount of respect she has for him. Emily claims she suspected it to be Anthony and Brandon for a while, causing CreepShow to pounce on that statement and try to put all of the blame on her friend Brandon. Going on further, stating that last year Brandon tried to get Emily fired because Anthony chose her over him, and that he had been trying to dip into the art YouTube world, but it hadn't been going well for him. Emily asks where Brandon lives now, to which Shannon claims she didn't know. There's some back and forth conversation figuring out where Brandon lived, and Emily stated that she would be taking that information to the PI, but really hopes it's not her or Anthony. Shannon tells Emily to be safe and that if it was Brandon, they had nothing to do with it. Emily tries to end the conversation, wishing them both nothing but happiness from the bottom of her heart. Shannon responds by claiming, "Back at you." She tells Emily that if she ever needs any more information about the three of them, bad or to clear their names, then to let her know. Emily then asks for an address to serve them with papers, but backs down and is worried that she has the wrong people, to which Shannon offers to send them a PO box. Emily explains that she feels very emotional about this and is thankful for the help, but still has high suspicion.
I 100% was still convinced it was them at this point. and this is something I've had to work on in therapy. I am a weak-willed person. If you are nice to me, I will fold like a house of cards. And I was also still considerably afraid of both of them at this point, so whenever they would show me like a sliver of humanity, I would just cling to it because I just wanted everything to be over. I just wanted to be left alone.
Emily claims at this point she was left unsure what to do. Spend loads of money on legal action which she would struggle to afford, or spend it on something fun with her kids. But she decided it wasn't worth it, so laid low and started to post again. And then she began to notice all the comments, specifically Anthony's trolling, suddenly disappeared. To which Emily claims this solidifies that her stalker was Anthony and Shannon. The silence was brief, however, as she received a DM from an account claiming that a lolcow post from Shannon was posting old videos of Emily to an archive YouTube channel. Emily heavily notes here that this might not be Shannon at all, but finds the humour in the account dating back to 2017 and that was still active, similar to Anthony and Shannon's. These videos had gameplay or stills with the audio over them, with Emily expressing takes that could be seen as controversial now. Emily thinks that this could have been an effort to try and scare her into thinking she would get cancelled, but Emily says that she will always admit when she's wrong about something. In closing this segment up, it's important to talk about her follow-up video very briefly, in which she provided a lot more evidence to her pre-existing receipts, as well as additional ones to help fight her case. She then addresses the Twitter DMs by recording her phone to prove their legitimacy, and adds a very good point to the case by recalling a time where Shannon showed herself receiving a DM from the Sock Puppet account.
So this account was the one that was featured in one of Shannon's videos.
At least one person in this galaxy thinks I bought my views and I bought my subscribers, which means someone in this galaxy thinks I'm made of such wealth and such opulence that I bought myself subscribers.
The same account that DM'd Emily, claiming that CreepShow Art was copying her. Emily also stresses that she wasn't nitpicking every hate comment she received and labeling it from Anthony or Shannon. It's common for a channel to receive hate, but Emily describes normal hate comments being more against her content, while comments she suspected to be the pair were more tailored around Emily's physical appearance. She shows video evidence of the Instagram DMs with Shannon, and then goes onto Messenger to show evidence of the message she received on Messenger. That's mainly what this video's purpose was. However, it does add additional strong points against the mysterious account that DM'd Emily about the whole brother obsession situation.
Now, this is a super important piece of evidence that I stumbled upon. When BritaFilter messaged me and went through the laundry list of harassment that I had endured, they mentioned having a grainy video of me singing and playing piano. That video is an unlisted video, and the only person I've ever sent the link to was Anthony. That video is still on my YouTube channel to this very day. I never deleted it.
Emily ends the video here, expressing that she's been left traumatized from this entire stalking burden that's been hanging over her life for the past 12 years, and that it's caused her new physical mental health symptoms. It's crazy to me that YouTube, a platform that once started out with content such as funny bowl haircut man, can turn so dark in such a short span of time. And it really is an eye-opener just to show how terrifying the world we live in can get. It's important to look at things from both sides, but in my opinion, Emily has a much stronger case against Shannon. But anyway, that's my babbling time up now. If you don't mind me, I'm gonna go rot my brain with that essay that I've been procrastinating while editing this video. Oh no.
For the remainder of last year, all seemed quiet on the Western Front, with many assuming that CreepShow's extended hiatus was for good reason. And in a way, it certainly does. I doubt anyone was planning on welcoming them back too readily. However, many did wonder if she even intended to have a say in her own fate, or at least explain the reasoning behind her actions. If she had the opportunity, what would she say to the viewers? Well,
this video is being made for posterity to show I didn't do what I was accused of, and to show that what Emily has accused me and my husband of not only never happened to her, but could not have happened. happened. This video is being made to simply defend my and my husband's name and prove we did not do the things we were accused of.
On the 31st of December 2021, CreepShow posted a modest little return video spanning 2.5 hours with the charming title, The Lies of Emily Artful, parentheses, with evidence, just so you know that there will be bombshells dropped. However, rather than a shot at redemption, this CreepShow video was much more a kamikaze mission. Allow me to explain why.
I have learned that the only people I can count on in my life are the people who actually know me, and if a random person comes online and states I stalked them with quite sincerely no evidence and literally posts on their active accounts that disprove that, people I genuinely admired and loved would just go with it.
For many creators, a response video is at least about some sort of way back, even if they know that it'll never make things the way they used to be. They want to show that they are a better person in spite of the wrongdoings they have committed. I think everyone at least deserves one chance to make a case for themselves. But from the first impression of this video, it's clear we're not going to receive that. The thumbnail and title is already shifting focus towards this one event, which, although not an insignificant detail, was still only a part of a much greater story. What about the forum incident, for example, and the subsequent community post explanation that still doesn't hold up under any form of scrutiny? These are questions that are not answered in CreepShow Art's video. If you're looking for any form of closure, then this is not going to happen. Instead, we have a video that focuses on and attacks Emily Artful's testimony and reputation from every angle, providing receipts which, on the surface, could appear to contradict her story on certain fronts. The problem? Well, it's a CreepShow Art video.
One thing that Emily states in her video is that online harassment was never leveled at her until after she started working with Anthony professionally.
I had like a separate art account that was unrelated, a music account, and I started noticing a lot of really negative comments. I didn't think much of it because that's just kind of, you know, the business on social media is you get negative comments. I figured it was normal. I was just seeing an increased volume in them.
Now, to fully bring this video into context, it's really important to remember what Emily actually accused Shannon of, because at the end of the day, that's what an audience is interested in. Emily said a lot in her video, but the general gist was that Shannon had stalked and harassed Emily and then made a video to wash her own hands of the misdeeds she had committed and to take control of the narrative that was never hers to make in the first place. How does CreepShow deal with this? Well, terribly, to be frank. The whole premise of the video is an immediate misfire because a lot of what Shannon says is based on the fact that her word and the word of those around her is reliable, when she still hasn't absolved herself from lying to her audience about previous incidents that seem intertwined with this one, including the Amy situation, which is integral to the case she makes in this video as well. Shannon does discuss this, but once again only as a vehicle to discredit Emily, when in reality she should have been focusing on building up her own credibility first, because it wasn't long until the cracks in these character assassinations started to show.
If I wanted to cancel Emily, as they say I did, I would have just made a video of the screenshots of her taking photos of other women in public, making fun of their bodies, and posting them saying, "That'll do, pig, that'll do." Or, "Fat girls piss me off." Or, "Funny women are Jews, the rest are all our slur, and we laugh out of sheer disappointment." Or even her saying on a post of an anorexic teenage girl that she's skinnier than her. I didn't make a video on that because I didn't know those things until now.
Now, normally when dealing with a video of this sort of length and designed impact, I dedicate a good amount of time to deconstructing it. But this video is deceptively lightweight, and CreepShow's incensed tone can't disguise that. There are a lot of details designed to solely attack Emily's credibility, much of which is just not worth addressing, and the stuff that is still executed poorly.
This part is going to be brief, but Amy is not a reference to Emily. Amy is the girl who used to harass me online, who I originally met on stardoll.com when I was in middle school. As I say in the video, but Amy did not grow up in San Jose with me. We never knew each other personally, and she was someone I strictly knew online who lived states away from me.
Take, for example, Amy, a person who, after 10 parts, is addressed in a section where Shannon claims that Emily had misattributed her experience with this individual, who is very real as shown by emails. Now, we know that the harassment that Shannon claims to have suffered at the hands of this individual is undocumented because of Shannon's tendency to delete harassing emails. Nonetheless, she does provide evidence of communication with a person called Amy. With everything in mind, the most this could do is prove that Amy is a different person to Shannon, but at least it presents an alternative explanation, right? Well, there is one key detail to keep in mind here.
In order to prove my case, here are the cringy emails that Amy and I sent to each other in middle school.
In some of these emails, this individual signs off as Amy, a name that Shannon claimed to have concocted after the incident to protect this individual's privacy. So either Shannon was lying there or she was lying here. Either way, once again, she lied. And for a person who is trying to use their credibility to fortify their case, this is a rather abject failure. So let's turn our attention to the other accusation made against Shannon, that being of the actual stalking she was alleged to have perpetuated unedited before hijacking the story as her own. As always, the principle of innocent until proven guilty should prevail. But by God, does Shannon not make it easy for any of her supporters, going through details whose relevance ranges from questionable to completely unnecessary, making arguments that even a person with the most elementary understanding of human nature could retort.
Emily was well aware of this at the time and was not using drugs while dating Anthony. According to various social media accounts Emily ran between the ages of 13 and 20, Emily didn't do drugs and was in fact very against drug use. All of her posts from 2012 to before her video on My Husband and I state that she became sober from heroin in 2012. However, in her video against My Husband and Myself, Emily states that she only really got sober in 2015. If she was really using up until the year before making all of these posts, joining YouTube and writing the song, why would she not be honest and state that? Why parade around an untrue sobriety date for the past 5 years, especially when nobody was asking?
It should go without saying that drug addicts often won't publicly admit that they're addicted and may even deride other users for self-medicating, perhaps in an attempt to make themselves feel better. It should go without saying that sometimes sobriety may be a work in progress, and sobriety from one drug won't necessarily mean sobriety from every drug. Many will relapse and struggle with withdrawal. These are basic points that should have at least been considered for the final draft because they add nothing to the story at hand. But even on a standalone basis, what Shannon says is cynical and cruel.
On the Sugarfruit channel, Emily ended up doing a couple of controversial things, like posting an anime review naked in a bathtub. Emily states now in 2021 that she was high on heroin when she did this, but as established, that cannot be true.
That was just one example, but there are so many others which just seem like unnecessary jibes at someone's past, unearthing all these accounts. Whatever valid point that may be made is inundated with petty comments and ill-tempered asides that reflect Shannon's own nature. Even points that may be valid were tainted with a misinterpretation of comments that Emily was making. I often found myself returning to Emily's video to make sure I hadn't missed anything. Like this, for example, Shannon states that there would be no need to create a fake account to find out Emily's location of employment because Emily was already Facebook friends with Anthony.
Emily said she started getting Facebook friend requests from people she didn't know in 2014 when she started working with Anthony professionally, and said it was all Anthony and me.
And again, you know, Andrew and potentially maybe Shannon did everything they could to try to find out where I was working.
However, if you watch Emily's video, she clearly states that the intent of this fake account was to bait her to reveal information that was clearly not already public, not even to people who had her added as friends.
But I accepted the friend request, and then, of course, they post, hey, does anybody know of any really cool, this specific type of cuisine restaurants in this specific location? They wanted to try to bait me to be like, yeah, I work here, so that they could call and get me fired from another job.
So it would be ineffectual as to whether someone had her added prior. The only significant detail is the DM that Emily Artful posted herself, where she reveals to Anthony where she was working. But once again, because we don't have much of a timeline, it's hard to tell if this was before or after the fake account was created. The creation of a fake account clearly implies that whoever was committing this did not want to be found out. You could even say that Emily telling Anthony could have actually deterred him from acting because it could then be linked back to him. Now that's just one theory, and Shannon has a completely valid alternative one here, but her interpretation of Emily's argument leaves you wondering if she didn't care enough to look at what Emily was exactly saying, or she didn't expect the audience to, and that was one of her stronger points. There are too many examples of this. I'm not going to go through them point by point, plenty of other people have, but even if Shannon did want to destroy Emily's credibility, she still should have started with rebuilding her own. And you know what? I get it. Shannon doesn't want forgiveness, fair enough. She wants to drop the nuclear warhead and has little regard if she ends up in the blast radius. However, because one of the core arguments made against her was that she breached a person's privacy and dignity, the scorched earth tactic ultimately backfires because it proves that exact point. There's so much here we didn't need to know. Even if it was shameful behavior, Emily already addressed this narrative in her original video. Speaking of Emily, she had a bit more to say as well. On the 9th of February, Emily uploaded her rebuttal to CreepShow's response and counter-allegations. Now, unlike Shannon's video, there is a lot of content here, but it does form a pretty streamlined narrative that isn't too difficult to unpack.
The runtime was intimidating and the tone was off-putting. To watch it was to jump into a pool of angry, chaotic information overload. It focused on the wrong things. It put words in Emily's mouth. It did not explain the things that needed explaining, and it only added fuel to the fire of confusion and disappointment.
Even before Emily's response video, many were already picking apart the flaws of Shannon's upload. And with a high proportion still denouncing Shannon's behavior, Emily was not obliged to make a response at all. But she did, and it was another lengthy one, clocking in at approximately 1.5 hours. This time using physical and circumstantial evidence to not just refute Shannon's arguments, but to prove that Shannon basically went mask off as the stalker in her own video. And she didn't even have to advertise the evidence in the title.
And my Ranting and Raven 9gag account isn't attached to any of my other social media. I very briefly used Ranting and Raven as my screen name on YouTube before I ever uploaded any content onto it. So Shannon would have had to have knowledge of that username in order to search for it elsewhere. This is not the first time that Shannon showed a username of mine where I had no idea where she found it. In her document, she includes a list of my aliases, as she calls them, and one of them is Emma Dilemma, and Dilemma is spelled incorrectly, which is a DeviantArt page I vaguely remember making, but has since been deleted or removed and cannot be found by searching for it on DeviantArt or on Google. For Christ's sake, I even resorted to using Bing and DuckDuckGo, and I could not for the life of me find this DeviantArt account. So that begs the question that if Shannon really only researched all this information after my video came out, how did she get those usernames? And it even begs the question, how did Anthony get those usernames? Because when I search within our messages for either Emma Dilemma or Ranting and Raven, nothing comes up. I just find it weird because having a list of every single alias and username I've ever went by online is something that the BritaFilter account mentioned.
This includes observations regarding lost accounts that Shannon somehow knew the existence of, private contents that Shannon shared, and these details own corroboration with the content used by some of these anonymous accounts that had harassed her.
Another action I find unusual is how in Shannon's unedited Google Doc, she goes into great detail about a very small, specific account that was re-uploading the audio of my old videos. She talks about how she knew this account existed before, and because she's such a good person, she tried reporting this account several times. Oddly enough, this exact same account is actually linked in one of her suspected lolcow posts, and this was the account that multiple sock puppets were trying to get me to notice. This is almost as strange as the fact that every detail Shannon chose to fixate on in her video is almost exactly all the same stuff that the BritaFilter account claimed that their 15-year-old brother was fixated on, like the bathtub video and accusing me of buying subscribers, and that they were actually the ones that got me fired from the optical shop. And let's not forget that BritaFilter even mentioned a video that I had only ever sent to Anthony, and they have a list of pretty much every screen name I've ever had. You know, the gang's all here, really.
Emily then continues to pick off the narrative surrounding Shannon's attempts to cast doubt on her substance issues and story regarding her violation at the hands of Shannon's husband, Anthony. She presents counter-evidence and content that appears to contradict and in some cases outright disprove the charges brought before her, leading to more questions about Shannon's intentions.
She claims that my real sobriety date was in November 2012 and uses the lyrics from a song I wrote, sang, and posted in September 2016, specifically about my relationship with heroin, as confirmation of that date. The lyrics are 3 years in November, and she says that's for the proof that my sobriety date was in November of 2012, except November 2016 minus 3 would be November 2013. She also did this using a clip from my I Dated a Sociopath video, which I uploaded in May of 2016.
This wasn't aided by the fact that an early draft of Shannon's video was leaked where she appears to disclose even more unnecessary information and goes off on further unhinged diatribes towards people she had felt betrayed her, including former friends who spoke out about her, and even an artist who she claims scammed her despite all evidence suggesting otherwise. The tone in this script was even more self-superior, even including a paragraph where she rejects an apology that hasn't even been made yet, implying that Shannon almost had an expectation that this would truly flip the narrative on its head and expose everyone for the frauds they were. Alas, it didn't. I think it just showed that Shannon only really knew one thing, and that was how to expose. But sometimes in doing that, you expose more about yourself than you do about others. One key observation that seems to reveal Shannon's intention with the video comes right at the start, where Shannon claimed that her video's publication would be the result of some in or out of court settlement, which Emily disputes and seemingly debunks nearly immediately.
In the letter that was sent to me by her lawyer, and don't worry, I'll get to the lawyer in a minute, her lawyer states, "If you publicly comment on this letter or the matter discussed herein, we will take that as a rejection of our offer to engage in settlement negotiations and will proceed to litigation." And earlier in that clip, Shannon specifically said that if you, the audience, were viewing the video, it means we either settled in or out of court, most likely meaning I would have had to abide by her original request to remove all mention of Shanthony and stop speaking about everything. So that leads me to believe Shannon wanted to get me to a place where I had to not only mysteriously delete all of my allegations, but also to zip the lip about the situation entirely, all while she eventually released that fail of a video, and I would be allowed to do shit all about it.
On Shannon's behalf, though, it shows a more calculated aspect to this plan. An assumption that under the threat of legal repercussions, Emily would roll over and open up an avenue for CreepShow to make her unchallenged return. Emily didn't do that, so this route remained firmly shut, while also allowing her to make this further response challenging Shannon's initial assertions. Emily didn't squander this opportunity, arguably making an even better and more concise video than the one that started all of this.
She even tried to set up a paper tiger argument in the unedited version of her Google Doc, where she says that if I try to say that her having all this information about me is stalking, then I'm just playing the victim. That she was just trying to clear her name and she did extensive research in order to do so. Because look, this is all still publicly available. Well, except for this. And except for this. Well, okay, except for this. But she had a DeviantArt when she was 13 that she posted hypersexual cringe.
There's a very minor point that, in my opinion, speaks a lot to the differences between the two creators. Shannon brings up a video in passing where Emily discusses a relationship she seemingly had with a 13-year-old when she was 17. It's another rather tangential jab, but people may have moral issues with that behavior, even when it's from that long ago.
Penny was a beautiful, charming young girl. We got along incredibly well. She was exactly my type, both physically and mentally, or so I thought. And the only possible foreseeable downfall to our relationship at that time was that she was a little bit immature, and she was a little bit immature because she was 4 years my junior.
In her response video, though, Emily explains that she was actually the 13-year-old and that the video in reference was a situation where she reversed the roles as a coping mechanism. There appears to be evidence to back this up, and it seems like a consistent story with what we know. But while clarifying that the situation was obviously inappropriate, she states she has no ill feelings towards the other party involved, as they clearly understand what they did was wrong and they've remained on good terms since.
This person was not and is still not a terrible person, and we still get along to this day. I just really wanted to clarify that this person and I are much closer in age than originally portrayed in my video. It was a running joke among our mutuals at the time because the age gap at first glance seemed a lot larger than it actually was. This person obviously realizes that the relationship was inappropriate in nature and has since owned up to it. We've discussed it, and I don't hold any ill will against this person. If anything, I still feel embarrassed about how that interaction went down. I still really don't know how to feel about all of it. I know this person is anonymous, but still something within me felt that needed clarifying because I do still care about this person.
It's a moment of humanity, and it demonstrates an ability to rise above the portrait that Shan was trying to paint, that she wasn't going to conform to that image of the person who was only interested in victimizing themselves. She showed sympathy, clemency, and humanity, and gave leeway to many, even those who may have harmed her in the past. At one point, she even censors one of those people who had provided testimony against her, as she believes they had been misled and wants to protect their privacy. It's not just compassionate, but it conveys a sense of peace with oneself and their own experiences. In many ways, Emily's video is a damning response. The evidence presented certainly doesn't help Shannon's case, but there's always going to be ambiguity on that front, especially when evidence or parts of it have been lost. People are going to have to use their own judgment to fill in the blanks. Emily's decision, however, to take the high road in presenting her story and contrasting that with Shannon's conduct was more conclusive than anything else, because ultimately it proved that Emily had moved on from her, quote, checkered past, and Shannon hadn't. Shannon's plan seemed to be based on building a pattern of behavior to back up their allegations that Emily was an unreliable narrator. But the problem is that even if there was any pattern, it stopped long before she decided to come forward with the present-day claims. If anything, Emily's videos seemingly displayed Shannon's response for what it was, a callous attempt to elicit revenge against a person who they felt had played a role in their downfall. The truth is though, as Emily pointed out herself, Shannon probably made a greater contribution to her own downfall than anyone else. Emily relayed her experience, and the experience spoke for itself. And if you weren't entirely convinced at the time, Shannon's own response video also seemed to speak for itself. A video that seemed so quintessentially Shannon when she least needed it. However, with Shannon proclaiming it as her final video, perhaps it was the only way she could ever go out. She did not go gentle into that good night. But how did Shannon fool so many people for so long, friends included? Well, let's talk about it. A day before Emily Artful's bombshell upload, our friend Hopeless Peaches also posted a video detailing Shannon's tone when she approached CreepShow in private, with some striking similarities to say the least.
Okay, and now this bit was just another part that really began to panic me. If I'm completely honest, reading it still kind of makes me feel anxious. It felt like a threat. I think I would go so far as to say, without a doubt, it is one. This all started because I simply asked, out of concern, to just take out one accusation from her video, and I was being threatened with more. Not only if I, but if anyone else made a video in my favour or shared proof of her lying about me.
Not too long after, a former friend of Shannon's, and even someone purporting to be the sibling that Shannon doxed, came forward corroborating Emily's testimony with their own experiences.
And the most confusing and almost laughable part of this is that a couple days before all of this information came out, Shannon had sent me roses to my own house. You know, so like, I think that was also part of it. It sounds stupid, but it's like, how do you reconcile, oh yeah, someone sent me roses, but they also don't think much of me and are shit talking me on a website. It is so contradictory that you almost feel a little bit crazy because you're like, okay, what happened in between? Like,
they weren't the only people to testify on this behaviour. In fact, in the weeks following, there were plenty more people who wanted to weigh in. However, broadly speaking, the reaction across social media as a whole was one of shock. You've got mail! And that's a testament to the facade that she had successfully crafted. With that in mind though, none of her previous antics seemed particularly incongruent with the revelations uncovered by the various corners of the internet. It just exposed the sheer lengths she would go to create them. The word breadcrumbs is used a lot, and it's not hard to see why. The stories that she supposedly manufactured would often span years, and would regularly crop up ages after they'd first been told, often as a means to defend herself from criticism. In many ways, it made her online persona almost impenetrable, because whenever people would raise the issues with her content, she would default to that backstory that she had so vividly depicted in older videos. In many ways, those story times spawned the foundation for that sympathetic portrayal that many assume when watching her content.
The fact is that because of YouTube, I was able to make a life for myself. A life where I am no longer sleeping in public with my car. I'm no longer worried about getting kicked out of parking lots by cops and men following me to my car and jacking off on the window, which yes, did happen, and yes, still stresses me the fuck out.
Through countless situations, observers interpreted Shannon's shortcomings as carelessness or emotionality, and although they were viable explanations at the time, were they really believable with the context to so many of her other actions?
Out of everything I've done my entire life, deciding to move into a car with my boyfriend was actually a choice that I in no way regret.
Simply put, no. She constructed so much of her in-video personality from these lies that she had espoused. Everything that had been demonstrated in the space of 2 weeks unraveled that persona because it was so antithetical to what she represented, yet it all made sense. A person so sensitive to others, so socially conscious, using slurs more than comfortably, attacking friends who thought she would fight to the death for them, someone who had channeled intensity and passion in videos when discussing subjects that they proclaimed were meaningful to them, applying many tactics to harm those that they had distaste for while decrying those same actions publicly. It all pointed to one thing, that Shannon had something she valued more than those around her and the principles that they possessed. And in my opinion, that was drama. Here are the two facts that I think most can agree on. Emotions heighten drama and misinformation heightens drama. However, most of us don't seek to be emotional, nor do we seek to mislead our audience. Nonetheless, CreepShow Art's content was primed for that sort of toxic combination, absolving itself under the guise of humanity or style. Nevertheless, it would still provoke people, and when the drama was at a lull, she'd find ways to generate it, whether this was her behavior on the lolcow forums or just spontaneously deciding to take aim at someone who she felt had wronged her like Hopeless Peaches. In many ways, the tabloid exaggerations that CreepShow Art fell foul to never seemed like a cut and dry case of overinvestment in content, but more just the desire to fulfill a daily quota of drama while trying to maintain the masquerade that she wasn't the person who instigated it. She wanted to be at the center of drama without bearing the responsibility that it occurred in the first place. Her language would regularly tread the line between being incendiary and observational, riling people up but falling back onto the observational defense when people protested her presentation. Even in the Emily Artful situation, one that illustrates a much more disturbing pattern, whatever motive was behind her involvement, the behavior that was credited to her was accented by provocation of a person with the intent to spurn a response or a reaction. In many instances, she would use that reaction to fuel more videos where she would employ that advantage to put other creators down further. Even when she regularly misrepresented those she was criticizing, that infallible platform that she established regularly led her to emerging from dramas largely unscathed. In the case of our sketchbook friend, it felt like Shannon was hoping that Emily would jump the gun, make allegations from an emotional place, and Shannon would capitalize on it with the rational put down, and the backlog of evidence established through the breadcrumbs. Fortunately, Emily confronted Shannon in private and managed to end the harassment in a way that put the ball in Shannon's court about going public, which she still managed to do, but just not in the way that one would have expected, but in a no less calculated fashion.
She told me how over the years really fucking with me and sending me those rage-filled emails became a way for her to cope with the stress of her life. After we had blown up the way we did, she went through an insanely hard time in high school, and it was a way for her to get her anger out, her messing with me. So all that anger, all that rage was not just at me, but the people around her who were hurting her. She then went on to get married after high school, have a kid right away, and was an army wife, and anytime she was stressed or upset, she would turn to me, and she would turn to fucking with me.
In many ways, the original video where she talks about her stalker Amy is on the surface a classic fake story designed to elicit sympathy from viewers. However, beneath it there were a couple more details that seemed to take advantage of the situation it was based on, all dependent on Emily's own feelings. First, a way to try and cement its truth so those appeals in the months prior to Mrs. Artful would seem more justified. Second, to hopefully gag Emily in a way that speaking out would incriminate her. But third, to also promote this idea of forgiveness and moving on.
Having realized that I had done something to her, something that made her feel justified in doing this to me, made me realize, as fucked up as what she did was, I was probably not as innocent as I thought I was in this. I'm not trying to imply that I deserved this shit or that anyone deserves this shit to be done with them, but like, my actions led to that reaction that I got, you know?
In a way, if Emily did watch this video and felt emotionally susceptible to the parallels of this Amy mystery, she might also hear about how Shannon had resolved it and moved on, and felt inclined to do the same. But she couldn't, as long as Shannon hadn't moved on from those antics herself. But with that in mind, let's do just that.
When I went into recovery for the final time, I did the work, I worked hard, and I had to take a long, hard look at myself in the mirror, and it wasn't pretty. It was ugly and it was broken, but I had to do it in order to change. Shannon, you need help, and this is me and everyone else asking you to go get help, not just for yourself, but for the people that you have hurt. You need to take that long, hard look in the mirror like I did and see the ugly, broken pieces. There's no magic glue to put every single piece back together perfectly, but once it's all put back together, there is a clearer reflection.
There's a lot of Emily's story that resonates with me. Fortunately, not the bit where she was stalked for how many years. However, coming from a bad place and having YouTube take you to a better place, at least is something personal for a lot of people, myself included. Those who appreciate what YouTube has given to them, the responsibility, the care, the public interest, they don't take that for granted. As Emily said herself, they look into the mirror, they see what's wrong with themselves, and they work on it. Shannon simply didn't. She just adapted her toxic behavior to an evolving environment, which enabled her to garner the upper hand in certain social situations. It's two sides of a very divided coin. In a way, Shannon preyed on one of the most flawed aspects of online culture, our nature to analyze tone rather than content. I've spoken at length on what constitutes a good response or a bad one, but the truth is that a bad response isn't always indicative of a person's character. Drama often occurs under stressful circumstances where one's reputation may feel completely at stake. And although I'm always of the belief that audiences deserve clarity and honesty from their creators, and it's hard to trust them if they can't provide that, I also accept that sometimes people crumble and can't offer what viewers deserve to hear. Shannon seemed acutely aware of this, and accordingly deftly balanced emotion and content to the point where many would make excuses for her shortcomings, even if they regularly prolonged unnecessary conflict between multiple parties. As long as the other person was clearly more unstable or more unjustified, it was fine to jump in on them with baseless accusations or slanted framing. This was not just a method that was effective on her own channel, but off her channel, with platforms like Twitter used for exchanges that would occasionally inspire subsequent content. But eventually she came face to face with someone whose actions could not be traversed: herself. Shannon had a way of provoking people that made them look unreasonable, when in reality she had merely given herself a strategic advantage and otherwise held very little moral high ground. When she couldn't do it in her own name without incriminating herself, she did it anonymously, using sock puppet accounts to shovel hatred against her enemies, her friends, and even her family. Whether that was on Twitter or on Lolcow Farm, who knows how far it truly went. It would be hard to take her word at face value.
If you like my older videos, thank you. I mean it. Thank you. It means the world to me that the art I made in that time frame means a lot to you, because it means a lot to me. However, I do not want to go back to the person I was when I made those videos.
When these criticisms did validate her response, although Shannon conceded on certain demerits, she'd also defiantly stand by her body of work, using her success story as a proud defense for her content, warts and all, talking about how she'd come from the homeless girl recording out of her car. And a lot of people were won over by that, appreciating that even if she was imperfect, they were receiving a raw version of someone who was doing their best. The problem was, it was just another part of the act, a way to make her story seem more genuine, noble, and earnest, when it was in fact more fraudulent than anything else before. It was never raw, it was well prepared, seasoned, served on one of those pretentious square plates. However, when you go to such lengths to maintain an image, its eventual collapse will only be more catastrophic. While most at arm's length brought the illusion presented on the CreepShow Art channel, the overreaching nature of the modern internet can be incriminating, and much of the evidence that follows seemed hard to dispute. From IPs to old screenshots, they may have been imperfect on their own, but together they painted a picture very clear for viewers who had the ability to use logic. In many ways, the fatal mistake that CreepShow made was surrounding herself with principled people and viewers who weren't afraid to speak out about her malicious behavior, and when people began to speak out, they didn't really stop.
Shannon told me how she had plans to harass Emily, either by sending her letters or prank calling her home, how she planned to leave hate messages on her videos or DM her from burner accounts to spread hate. This is when I began to distance myself from Shannon. And if this is true, these are all things that Emily Artful has accused her of. So if this story is true, it definitely coincides with the allegations that are being made by Emily Artful, and it seems to lend some credibility to them.
Throughout much of the last few parts, I have attributed many actions to Shannon. With that in mind, particularly with regards to Emily's situation, there is also a lot of behavior that could be connected to Shannon's husband, Anthony, especially with mind to the more serious allegations. I don't want to downplay this, or solely place the responsibility on one person. Someone's silence shouldn't absolve them from accountability. However, in using her platform, Shannon grouped these claims in with many of those made against her, appointing herself main respondent, putting her own credibility on the line for the person she wanted to stand by, concocting the narrative that if Emily was an unreliable narrator, then none of the allegations could bear that weight. Unfortunately, that failed, and therefore many of these points against her and her husband appeared to hold up, and her lashing out at former friends for criticizing her or Anthony's actions seemed even less justified, particularly with how she went about it. Listen, I can't sit here and tell you that everything discussed in today's video is true beyond a shadow of a doubt, but there's a reason for why it is so widely believed, and why many people, even former friends of Shannon, find it highly plausible. For Shannon to be angry at people for believing that, and using their platform to criticize her like they would anyone, is unrealistic and unreasonable. If anything, her comments just substantiate this sort of Disney villain-esque arc that she seemed to be undergoing. Once again, trying to hold past commitments over people's heads after circumstances have changed. The difference is, Shannon, the commitment that people make to stand by you is dependent on how you treat them as well. When you craft your personal network the way you craft your drama, you can hardly be surprised they turn on you. Most people do not want to denounce a friend, and she certainly didn't make it easy for anyone. I'll give her that much. Although it may not always seem that way, a lot of creators do just want to be left alone to get on with their work. They don't want to start drama, they want to express themselves on their channel and enjoy their real lives. Unless you've built a career on seeking out drama, most audiences don't enjoy a person who's just constantly engaging in controversy. As public figures, you have to accept that there will always be people talking about you and you can't respond to every individual. However, you are still deserving of personal security, privacy, and decency. Those are principles held by a large majority of creators and viewers alike. Whether it was on lol cow farms or not, Shannon's behavior showed a blatant disregard towards those principles that she had advocated for. And to many of her viewers, that was a cardinal sin. To them, that became the real Shannon. And the subscriber count spoke for itself. The person they knew before, the story she told, the beliefs she instilled in them, it lost so much of its worth. And with that in mind, how could you trust her commentary on sensitive subjects that banked on those exact fundamentals that she deserted?
You knew that wasn't okay when you said it. You cannot pretend and rewrite history to be the victim here. You can't pretend you didn't do what you did. That is garbage, and you should be ashamed of yourself for trying to lump the deliberate, considered actions you took over an extended period of time.
The simple truth is, you can't. If this had been outburst or old news, then sure, maybe she could have changed. But it spanned long into her YouTube career, up until she was called out for it. And if you only stop something when you're called out for it, then you'll always struggle to prove to people that you've stopped for the better of reasons. If it had been a strictly minor personal dispute, then maybe there'd be a reason to keep it private. But it clearly overlapped onto her public platform and how she used it, which made it even harder to defend, with behavior that many interpreted as borderline criminal. Unfortunately, with all these circumstances considered, it may just be too late for Shannon in the online world. I will seldom argue that a person whose channel has changed them for the better should reconsider their status on the basis of their past. And I'm sure Shannon's success did a lot for her, but the root of that toxic behavior persisted, on her channel and off it. In that case, there are changes that we can make, we can learn, evolve, do better. I 100% believe that. It's just sometimes we have to do it in a different place to where we were before.
So, it's so gross. Thomas, you are a public figure who makes very public accusations and statements about everyone else being fraudulent and vile. So you cannot just excuse yourself from the table when that setting that you're benefiting from comes back to you.
You don't have to return to the places of hardship to be a better person, but you do need to know what took you there and what can take you out. Otherwise, you'll just continue to be drawn back into that toxic cycle. CreepShow Art wasn't just a part of that cycle, but often perpetuated it, inadvertently tying it to her brand and the personal story which so many thought resonated with them, the emergence from a bad place by doing good things. When the truth was revealed, she was pulled down with the falsehood she had crafted and those she had led on with it. If that was the real CreepShow Art, then people would rather forget her. The illusion of reality is one often crafted by online personas. It makes sense in a way, but when you tie that to your whole personality and beliefs, then you need to have some conviction and commitment to what you advocate for. CreepShow didn't, and ultimately paid the price for it. I hope she never goes back to where she was, but she can't stay where she is either. For now, I'll leave the rest of the judgment to you. Let's move on. And there we go, that was the video. I know this one's been in the works a long time. We've had a fair few delays, but we have prevailed and we have completed it, and I am grateful that we have got there. I'd like to first and foremost thank all the editors. Their links will be in the pinned comment. Go and check out their fantastic work. They're all really talented people. I'd like to thank my patrons, $10 patrons on the screen right now, and I'd also like to give a thanks to my $50 patrons, who are Velarex, Colin Ryan, Hypercube, Esther Bedoya, and Goldman. Thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot. I would like to thank the artists who create the stills. Obviously, their credits will be in the pinned comment as well. I'd like to thank Surfshark for sponsoring the video. As always, pleasure to work with you guys, and Code Opinion will get you a nice discount on their service. Thank you again for sponsoring. And a little brief announcement, if you're still listening, that I have been working on some merchandise. It's a work in progress still, and you can order it now, and if you input Code Opinion, then you'll get a discount for being the first to try some of the merch. I don't really have too much else to add. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you guys are doing well. Anyway, I'm The Right Opinion, and I'll see you in the next one.